Audio. All right. That's on. Here we go. Hello, anyone who's already there or is watching the video after the fact. This was not, this is not a regular like updates on stuff stream. This is just a generic thing I'm doing nonsensically, but everyone's probably watching the sports ball bowl anyways. Get those synced up. There we go. I'm forgetting something. I'm definitely forgetting something. Okay. Bathymetric Viewer is back up. So, again, a much better thing to use than Google Earth for just having a map tool to draw on state. And it's messing up. Of course, we do this, then we do this, then we do this, and now it works. So, as I was trying to say, a much better world map tool to draw stuff on screen on a stream with than Google Earth because Google Earth tends to cause streams to lag. At least for those of us like myself who aren't using an Epic Pro Gamer computer like Josh has. Although technically I do have his old Epic Pro Gamer computer, but everything is set up to run on my laptop and I don't feel like shifting stuff over because I'm lazy. All right, so while we wait for nobody to show up, we'll go over here and anyone can figure this out by scrolling backwards along the timer. But you go to any of my most recent videos, or not most recent, just any video made in like the last 2 years, in the description underneath below the PayPal and Patreon links, there is a free access drive link that takes you here to the free infinite resources and data drive folder that I am constantly adding new types of data and graphs to, trying to get as much stuff available for you guys and myself also before everything everywhere gets put behind paywalls permanently. So this is all here, and I'm gonna aimlessly wander us through this in a little bit. This is all here free to look at and use in your own stuff anyways. The only ask like regarding that would be like if you somehow use this for some report or some video of your own and you make like 10 grand or something off of it somehow, give me like, I say 2% of that maybe, but that's not even a requirement. I mean, it's not like I could actually sue anybody over it anyways, because that itself costs money. Let's see. So before going into that, I was going to, since we can't use the actual quiz website because it's so laggy and so laden down with ads, it's effectively unusable at this point. I was going to go through and just quickly highlight stuff with the fill in tool on Paint, since this map is labelless anyways, and reprove that I know every single country, or at least almost all of them. I would mess up some of the island ones, but not all the island ones are even visible on this map, though. So this is the best proof I can go to since the quiz websites are so laden with ads. And I wouldn't want to take the risk of those since half the ads are usually like porn, anyways. Do we have anybody else here? No, just Alex. All right. For anybody who is here and who is watching after the fact, here we go. So you have Canada, Alaska, not an independent country, but semi-functionally one. Also home, where I am from, Fairbanks around the center. But then 2020 happened, and I have been in exile ever since then. Down here in the regular United States, particularly near Charleston, South Carolina. I've been stranded for 6 years now. I want to return to my beloved eternal Arctic darkness. Then you have Mexico, Cuba, Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, French Guiana, Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, Belize, Guatemala, blasphemous name country, calls itself El Salvador, despite being supposedly like majority Christian, but they named their country the Savior, so that's kind of blasphemy. Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay. And we go over here, we have South Africa, Lesotho, Eswatini or Swaziland, depending on who you ask, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, Angola, Zambia, Malawi, Madagascar, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Big Congo, Small Congo, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, Sao Tome and Principe, just off the coast there, Cameroon, Central African Republic, also known as Eternal Civil War. And the charge is not registering here. Let me adjust the angle of my power cord. There we go. Now it's registering. Yet another reason why I need to make sure I get a new laptop before the end of this coming summer, before availability gets crunched by the Taiwan invasion. Nigeria, Benin, Togo, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, Gambia, Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Sudan, South Sudan, Ethiopia, within which you have several will be eventually independent nations of Tigray, Afar, and Amara, Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, and then, oh, you have these islands here are Comoros, and then I don't remember whether it's the further island or the closer island to Madagascar. One of those is the independent nation of Mauritius. These islands here are the Seychelles. These ones over here are the Maldives, just off the coast of India. Sahrawi, called Western Sahara by English speakers, but the name is Sahrawi, currently under occupation by Morocco. So there's Morocco or Maroc, Cabo Verde, these islands down here, Al Jazeera, or sorry, like, once you learn its real name, you'll constantly mix it up with the news channel, not Al Jazeera, but Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Masr or Misr is Egypt. Malta is tiny. I can't really fill it in. Italia with Sicily and Sardinia there. Corsica, part of France. And then you have France, Spain, España, Portugal. The UK, comprised of England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. And then Ireland, Iceland, Greenland, Norway or Norge, Sweden or Sverige, Finland, also known as Sumi, Estonia or Eesti, Latvia, which is just Latvia, just pronounced a little bit different, Lithuania, which they say Lietuva, Belarus, Ukraine or Ukraina, Russia or Russia, Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, or in reality, Hellas, Turkey, Cyprus, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Sakartvelo, which many people falsely call Georgia, because yet another case, I guess Sakartvelo was too difficult to pronounce. Polska, or Poland, Česko, Czech Republic, Slovensko, Slovakia, Magyarország, Hungary, Serbia, Montenegro, Albania, or Shqipëri, Macedonia, Bosnia, Croatia, which is, oh man, uh, Vratska. I cannot. I can do HVR, but apparently it's HRV. I cannot make that sound. I apologize to my non-existent Croatian viewers. I cannot make that sound. Slovenia, Österreich or Austria, Switzerland, Switzerland, Deutschland, Germany, Nederland, Belgique or Belgium, Luxembourg, Denmark. I'm not coloring in all of Denmark. Kaliningrad is that exclave from Russia, and then Liechtenstein is a little tiny country in between Switzerland and Austria. Andorra is right there on the border of France and Spain, and San Marino is a little city state in the middle of Italy, and Monaco is a little city state on the coast of France. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then down here, chunks of all of these together are actually a land called Balochistan, which will be an independent nation soon enough, along with eventually Kurdistan, which is up here, the UAE, Oman, Yemen, India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, which is eventually going to be 5 or 6 countries, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia. Here, I'll color in up to this many. You guys will just have to live with that. The Philippines, color in that one, maybe those two, and I guess that one. Taiwan, China or Zhongguo, the island of Hainan just off the coast there, Papua New Guinea, and this island that I just colored in now is Bougainville, which is going to be an independent nation as of next year, actually. Timor-Leste, this little bit over here. Australia, one of the foreign places I have been to. New Zealand, New Caledonia, still technically a part of France, although the actual New Caledonian people want to be independent. But France has a habit of encouraging a bunch of French people from France to conspicuously move there in a well timed fashion to skew independence votes. Fiji, the island chain of Vanuatu, and then the island chain of the Solomon Islands, South Korea, or Hanguk, and then North Korea, which also is technically Hanguk. Uh, they both. It's another case of like China and Taiwan, where they both, they both say, we're the real this name. In their names, they don't like actually say South and North in language. In English, they do specify to avoid confusion at the UN. Basically, Mongolia, the island of Sakhalin there, not a country, but point that out. And then you have Japan or Nihon with main island Honshu, Hokkaido up there, Kyushu down here, and oh, I forgot what the middle one was. I do not recall the middle one. Let's see, and then you have Samoa down here, and nearby them in this general assortment is Tonga, and then in the near in like roughly the middle, you have Nauru and Tuvalu, and then the wide spread, the big, huge, like 3,000 mile wide spread across the central slash Western Pacific is Micronesia, and then you have the Marshall Islands, and I forgot the one other island one. It's uh it's this one like right here. It's like this one little island because Guam is one of the bigger ones down here, but that little island right there. I forgot that one. Let's see. How do I? Oh yeah, back. Erase all those. All right, that should be. Stop disregistering the power cord. All right, I think that's all of them. So there. I have proven or reproven my claims from long, long ago. Uh oh, the G is a Y. Okay, J is supposed to be a Y. Come on, come on, guys. You in all the non-English European languages, the J is supposed to use the Y sounds, not why you turned it to G. You can't do this to me. Um, whoop. Oh, that is a duplicate link to the Internet Archive of stuff. That Vuk is a Hungarian film, a little animated fox cub Hungarian film that's pretty pretty good. One of the few good things that managed to come out of Eastern Europe under the Soviet oppression period. That's the only reason there's two there is because it must have just been a duplicate link. Actually, I don't know what this bar is about because they're all just supposed to be in here and in mixed up subfolders. Show more bookmarks, import bookmarks. Well, I'm gonna have to click that link soon once I get a new laptop, hopefully. Well, there's no show less bookmarks. But yeah, no. The only the reason there's two of them is just because it must have duplicated without my explicitly knowing so, at least. Oh, you can. Okay. Wait. Oh, I thought you were the same. There's two different Alexes. Okay. So, uh, so, so Norge, uh, Norge then, or something close to that, as opposed to Norge, Norge. A big Q is huge. Oh my. So, but what? But there's okay. There's already an SH, so it's SHCH for for Albania's actual name. So okay, hold on. SH apostrophe CH. Uh no, my throat instinctively goes for a K sound. Okay, I'm probably gonna throw that uh into the HRV Croatian sounds category of something I can't pronounce. Way to alienate my non-existent Albanian and Croatian viewership. Okay, so for anybody who is here, actually, yeah, let's check the wow, that's more people than I would have expected to be here. Oh, a bunch of people started showing up just recently. You've all missed my demonstration of knowledge retention. You scroll back on the timeline, and you can see me demonstrate my retention of knowledge of almost every country on Earth, minus a few island nations. Actually, hold on. Oh, wait. We have to avoid Google's AI. So let's go directly through Wikipedia. List of islands, trust territory, history of the Pacific Islands. I guess island country, that should be good enough. That should get us there. Where's the list? Where's the list? Where's the list? List islands by country, islands by area, island list of island countries. There we go. Where's the one? The one I was forgetting. Was it PW? What does PW stand for? You don't have the key down here? Where's the key? More details? Does more details include the key? It doesn't. Wow, so helpful. Okay. Uh, no, Sri Lanka. Let's just see if I see it here. Nope, that is not independent. Okay, let's see. Got those. Kiribati. It was Kiribati. I forgot the one other one I forgot was Kiribati. Okay. All right. But yeah, you scroll back there, you can see my 99% demonstration of all countries of Earth knowledge. But anyways, we're going to meander through this as a way of flexing and showing this off. Since for anyone who is not aware of it somehow, which you would only be if you haven't been here before, that is, if you go down to the description of any video I've made the last 2 years, under the PayPal and Patreon links, there's a free access drive link, which takes you here to Max Ogier's free infinite data center. Not that kind of data center, but a center filled with data that you can access freely. There's no paywall. The pay buttons above it are optional. I'm doing this actually explicitly because everything has been getting put behind paywalls by every website and news organization out there. So I'm trying to get as much as I can openly available to everyone before everything starts getting walled off. So we were going to meander through here, start with actually global production or output levels of various metals and minerals from mining operations worldwide, as the MCS 2026 data finally released recently. I didn't get to finish all of the graphs in time, the updated ones, but I'll go through the ones I did get, and I will work on going backwards further in time eventually, don't worry, but there's only MCS collected data back through 1994. So these graphs are all for the last 36 years. But this is the graph for aluminum ore, or bauxite ore is the proper name of it, measured in millions of tons mined over the past 36 years. It's gone from a bit above 100 million up to now kind of hitting a bit of a plateau, possibly temporarily, maybe setting in a bit more permanently as uh, economies are starting to hit the limit of our economic model, which I'll have a whole video and stream about how our economic model is inherently doomed, actually, but that's a subject for another time. So it's been meandering around here, bumped down from 440 down to about 425. And last year, total amount mined came in a bit above 440 million tons again. And the amount of aluminum or bauxite ore that is mined it's not the same as the amount of actual metallic aluminum that is produced or refined. That is completely different, because remember, the ore is the mineral that the metal that you are targeting, in this case aluminum, is contained within. And the amount of actual aluminum atoms within a given amount of bauxite mineral is usually around a little less than a quarter, like close to 20% or so. So that's why the total amount of like aluminum manufactured per year in present day is usually between like 100 and 120 million tons. It fluctuates a bit. For new aluminum made from the ore, if you include the additional amounts that are made from recycling aluminum scrap, then the amount is tens of millions of tons higher. Antimony, atomic symbol SB, which has been declining in usage, and that's part of the reason why mining output declined, but it was not that abundant of a mineral to begin with. So partly the lessening supply also contributed to uses switching to other things rather than using antimony. Magnetic reader strips for credit cards and ID cards used to use antimony and also used to use cadmium, but they've switched over to a less reliable, less durable magnesium compound, I believe now, that will wear off a lot quicker, which is actually kind of the secret reason why they switched cards over to using that chip, is because the drip using the magnesium compound would wear off that card really quickly if you kept using the swipe function in the as often as we used to. So antimony output from mines worldwide has declined all the way down to close to half of what it once was, around 100,000 tons a year versus the peak of 200,000 back in 2008. Beryllium is a very, very not abundant metal and is used for a few niche things that it cannot be substituted out of. And I think I have a pie chart for that in the thing of pie charts that we'll see eventually. But beryllium is especially needed for electrical functioning of the computers and electronic components of spacecraft and satellites, and in the very specific high strength aluminum alloys that are used for military guided high velocity guided projectiles and fighter jets and combat aircraft. So there's a reason why you see once we get past the mid 90s, we a lot of demand surge was the U.S. restocking itself post post Iraq and post Gulf War, and then you see the crash as now the Cold War was over. Russia had gone bankrupt and could not continue its military spending on modern munitions for a while until after the initial wave of high oil prices, the double wave, it had enough money to start building up stock again. And also, China at this time had risen and was building up stock. And now, post 2022, obviously, we see this upsurge in output as beryllium output from mines worldwide is basically just going to stay lockstep with demand as there's not a like ever increasing upsurge that it has to keep racing to meet. So it falls and climbs with demand as needed. And like 80% of it comes out of one specific location in Utah here in the US. And you see post 2022, you see this upsurge as quite a lot of additional uh, high velocity guided munitions and military aircraft are being manufactured as restocking Russia's attempt to keep itself stocked post Ukraine, and also China rapidly stock building ahead of attempting Taiwan, and us constantly uh, replenishing after sending stuff to Ukraine, and also enacting our own operations elsewhere, and also us doubling up on stuff in preparation for Taiwan as well, and Europe finally remilitarizing itself, all stacking together to result in this upsurge in demand, which has correspondingly resulted in this upsurge in beryllium output from mines worldwide, up to just a little bit less last year than it was in 2024. Total amount coming out last year was somewhere around 430 tons. And one of the issues with beryllium is kind of like all that germanium getting expended via the use of suicide drones in the war in Ukraine. Uh, the beryllium, being used for all those cruise missiles in every conflict, including the bigger Taiwan one that's upcoming. It's just lost once we use it. It's gone because the cruise missiles explode. The beryllium just gets atomized and scattered into the general environment. And also the satellites, all the satellites it gets used for, when those come back down, they sort of burn up on reentry, and thus the beryllium is again just atomized into the atmosphere itself, and it's gone forever. Boron has been trending down because we're still on a supply glut after there was an upsurge from a huge Turkish boron mine that just overflooded the market way too much, and we're still running off of that surplus to the point where boron prices have been so low that they've caused boron output from mines around the world to actually trend downward. And so boron is down a bit under 2.5 million tons per year. Chromium continuing to go up as demand for steel, its predominant use, continues climbing, and is now, for the first time, up over 50 million tons. And we are uh, emphasizing poking Kazakhstan to amplify its output, since South Africa is quickly becoming unreliable, and we're poking India to hopefully start digging through their reserves, since they have some that just haven't really been touched. And India isn't exactly going around, it doesn't exactly intend on going on any necro imperialism global conquest spree like a number of other countries do. So it's not doing anything as of the moment that's going to be rapidly turning everybody against them. Cobalt has upsurged as a result of the surging demand for not just EV batteries, but grid scale batteries, because we're still tied to that stupid idea that we're going to run the world on solar panels and wind turbines, and we'll compensate all the downsides with bunkers and bunkers full of batteries. But cobalt, almost all of which is coming out of the Congo, has surged up to an output of about 310,000 tons per year. It did not grow a lot over the course of last year because uh, EV battery demand actually stalled. Grid scale batteries kept going, but EV battery demand actually kind of stalled as EV sales did not keep going like everyone thought they were going to infinitely. And even in some European countries where they're still incentivized heavily, they actually contracted. But in the non-incentivized countries, or in countries like China where the incentives were ended, the sales actually heavily contracted, kind of lending credence to the whole idea that people weren't buying them because they're part of your cult. People were buying them because you were all but paying them to buy them. Copper is turning into another plateau and will likely be hitting its overall limits during the 2030s, has been most people's expectation. So at the moment, it's coming in again a bit short of 23 million tons, basically the same as it was the year before. And part of that is because of a number of constraints that happened over the course of 2025, like that massive rainstorm and mountainside collapse, mudslide in Indonesia that took out one particularly massive copper mine that was responsible for 3% of the world's supply. The one in Panama that was responsible for 1% of the world's supply being shut down forever. And also one in Peru, I believe, that suffered a landslide as well, but it's only going to have that one out of commission for like the next few months or so. That one should be up and running by the middle of the year again. I should check chat and be responsible. Uh, see, blah blah blah. I'm supposed to be blah 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 blah. Oh, that is, you are then person number 3, I think. I think that would be the third confirmed viewer from New Zealand, or at least person person who has admitted they're from New Zealand. That is fluorspar, the fluoride-containing mineral that we mine to get fluorine or fluoride. Which fluoride, which is used for a number of different things, but the predominant uses are it is required and consumed in the process of refining aluminum from its ore into actual pure metallic aluminum, as well as it's required a required component of fiber optic cables, and for a number of other chemical processes where the manufacture of different things requires the presence of hydrofluoric acid. Fluorspar basically rises and falls with demand. It's not hugely abundant, but it's not like terribly rare or anything. But it dropped back down from 10.5 or 10.3 or so back down to a flat 10 million tons per year. Gallium, one of the rare or strategic metals that's required for LEDs, that's required for quite a number of different computer processor functions, and for the higher efficiency solar panels that everybody wants to switch to because they get 33% of the sunlight into electricity instead of only 26. Gallium upsurged demand-wise with initially at the later 2000s once the LED lighting craze happened, and then started upsurging with the solar panel boom, and then started having, and again, because the production is basically just following demand, started upsurging even further around 2023 or 2024 when the AI cult started and a million, billion, bajillion data centers started getting built. So gallium is not mined in and of itself. It's something that comes along as a byproduct of others. It usually accompanies gold and silver ores or zinc and lead ores and copper ores. And it's just very diluted within those, like to the tune of 5 parts per million. And so it's not a case of it's constrained to any like geographical area worldwide. It's just a case of uh, whether any particular mining company or refinery is willing to pay to extract it from the tailings or from the ore residues afterwards. And since China was usually up until present day willing to do things the cheapest, that's why a lot of it was always coming out of China, was just because that was the cheapest option. But it is a case of it's not actually like constrained, like say cobalt is almost exclusively constrained to the Congo, uh, Western Australia, and northern Minnesota. Gallium is literally everywhere, but it's a pain to get it, and you kind of have to really pay for it. And we only just started deciding to really pay for it now because we want to get the refining concentration out of China. Germanium, similar story. So germanium is its primary use is for fiber optic cables. It's the one thing that allows them to truly function. And so with the birth and then surge of the internet in its different waves, you've seen the demand go up, which caused extraction of germanium to go up to or close to 250 tons per year. And extracted. Germanium is occurs within coal and also occurs within few different types of lead deposits, and you can extract it from any variety of those if you are willing to pay and put the effort into it. And most was being done by China because they were usually just the ones who offered the cheapest price for putting in the effort. But now we're starting to pay the higher prices because we don't want everything to be in their hands anymore. But it's not geographically constrained because, as I hope anyone watching knows, coal is literally everywhere. And one of the primary sources for germanium is coal. Again, it's really diluted within the coal, like 1 or 2 parts per million, but it is in there. Gold is hitting a fresh or has been on a fresh plateau, and this might be where we see it cap out, as the thinking was or tended to be towards it would probably peak or plateau between like 4 and 4.5 thousand tons per year if it kept going. But even with the various price surges we've had over the last number of years and in the 2010s before that, and the ones like around 2012 or 2013 that would have built on to, because remember, mining prospecting, startups, and full operations take from year zero up until year like 10 to 12 to really get started. So the upsurge here was off the backs of price surges that happened way back here. So all the price surges that happened there around the 2008 crisis and the 2010s, that would have been showing up here, but it ain't. Uh, Despite all the new stuff, we're still plateaued, and we've been worldwide at around 3,600 tons per year since 2018. Graphite, I did not update that, but several new mines started in Tanzania and Mozambique, and Madagascar, so that's where the sudden upsurge in graphite supply came from. Where the demand that drove up prices that then resulted in that upsurge came from is from, you guessed it, EV batteries. Helium, uh, extracted usually alongside natural gas, not because that's the only place we find it. There are natural places within the crust where we have found helium seepages on their own, like on the south bend of Lake Victoria in northwestern Tanzania, for example, and across the southern half of Poland. But normally it comes alongside natural gas simply because we're already, drilling hundreds or thousands of wells to get the natural gas anyways. So we figure, well, might as well, separate out the helium that's coming up with it. Helium was on a supply plateau for quite a bit. We were getting into some dangerous territory, was staying at around 160 million cubic meters per year. But thankfully, expansions on existing projects and new developments have cranked up global helium extraction to around 190 million cubic meters per year. At least was the case over the course of 2025. Indium, another strategic metal, and another one that is in the case of it doesn't occur on its own really. It's usually contained in other ores in a very low diluted concentration, and it has seen a gradual climb upwards, as initially it was used in some niche cases in certain types of computer processors, but once we hit the advent of touch screens or flat screens, not even touch screens, but just flat screens, whether they have the touch function or not, then indium demand surged, which drove indium extraction up and up because in flat screens, for a flat screen to exist, it relies on something called indium tin oxide. And one of the components of that compound, hopefully you can tell from the name, is indium. Iron ore uh, peaked in extraction back in 2013. It was way in overshoot from demand and kind of stayed flat since then, since that was, quite a bit of surplus that also kept prices down correspondingly for a number of years afterwards. They're only just now kind of really starting to climb up again. And iron ore, which again does not correspond directly to the amount of iron or steel that is produced per year. Iron ore is ironing out roughly around 2.6 billion tons per year. It came in right about the same again. Let me check chat like a responsible person. Let's see. Copper situation is interesting. Not anywhere near as much anymore. 60% of copper consumption, at least in 2024. I have not updated the pie charts to the new numbers. It's higher now as copper usage in piping is going down. But in 2024, specifically, 60% of all copper that we dug up or recycled was used to make electric wires. I'll get to those graphs eventually. Global lead production peaked in 2013 at about 5.5 million tons and has gradually slipped down into a plateau of sorts here, around 4.5 or so, as demand for regular internal combustion vehicles has not actually gone away like people thought it has. So lead acid batteries are still very much a thing. Lithium has upsurged in demand. You can take a guess as to why. And as a result of that, prices have constantly skyrocketed, causing new mining operations to open up everywhere and taking production up to, over the course of 2025, 281,000 tons per year. Let me drink some water. Manganese update. Manganese, one of the secret components of steel that people forget about. Everyone seems relatively aware that it's generally iron and carbon, but even the most basic steel still almost always contains about 1 or 2% manganese. Manganese has jumped upwards in demand and then kind of leveled off, followed along with which its production then followed along with. Went from around 7 million tons per year in 94 up to around 20 million tons per year, where it's been at a plateau of for the last 7 or 8 years or so. The upsurge here, the demand curve basically followed this same trajectory as this production curve. Was basically the Chinese mega construction boom as China rose and continued afterwards, and is still actually up until even today, just nowhere near the same extent, building infinite amounts of stuff, uh, infamous ghost cities, for example, to try to make sure that that real estate bubble kept going and they kept drawing in investors. However, it eventually burst. It started to in 2023, where they lost 10% value. 2024, they lost another 10%. And then last year, over the course of 2025, they lost another 30%. So the Chinese real estate market bubble has finally popped and has down spiraled by about 50% of value over the last 3 years. So hopefully that will drop consumption a bit, start killing off the whole infinite ghost city, ghost highways, ghost everything construction projects. As you know, you it even for someone who has very little understanding, it should not take that much to compute. Literally have a declining, soon to be collapsing population, yet you are still building infinite new stuff, literal new cities out of the ground, up out of nothing. There's nobody there, and there's going to be less and less people there to begin with, anyways. Molybdenum, one of the components of stronger steel alloys, along with nickel superalloys, has undulated over the last decade and a half or so between 250 and 300,000 tons per year. And demand is a bit higher. So prices are up and is probably eventually going to be forcibly pulling production up. Nickel, primarily still its predominant use is for steel, and then now for batteries are consuming close to like 19% of it per year. Then nickel superalloys, the stuff that's used in like power plant turbines and jet engines and the like, and for rockets and everything. It's gone from 900,000 tons per year up to now 3.9 million tons per year, thanks to an upsurge in output from Indonesia. And there are limits to how much we can get. Nickel is everyone thought initially it was going to be lithium, but it was always going to be a mix of rare earths and nickel that's were the big limiter to the whole green energy revolution idea. Niobium has plateaued for the last few years, up around 110,000 tons per year. Its predominant use is for super high strength steels and other types of super high strength metal alloys. Palladium, one of the platinum group metals, has had stagnant output since about 2005 at around 210 tons per year, up and down, fluctuating. Last year, dropping from 215 down to around 195 or so. Not good, especially since, demand for the platinum group metals for, their biggest use being catalytic converters or emissions reduction devices for ground vehicles is not really going away. And now their demand is going to be surging up even more because now, apart from the solar panels and wind turbines thing, we're starting to chase after the whole hydrogen fuel cell economy nonsense idea, which requires a lot of PGMs for its fuel cell catalysts. Phosphate rock, one of the super fertilizer components that allows us to grow so many crops so quickly. The actual supply, how much is there, is not an issue. Is not an issue, but there's going to be eventually a limit to how much we can get out of the ground and how quickly. And it's gone from 128 million tons a year up to a peak of 269 back in 2017. But that was an overshoot. It was exceeding demand, fell back down until now, and it's been on its way back up, following the actual global demand curve, and is now back up to 250 million tons being mined up per year. Platinum, just like palladium, went stagnant and actually overall has gradually kind of declined in global output over the last 20 years, which is, not good. More so than the precious metals, the platinum group metals are actually excessively rare in the Earth's crust compared to like gold and silver. Platinum has gone from about 220 down to as of last year, 170 tons per year. Uh, Potash, it's supposed to be potash apparently, but before someone corrected me, I was always saying potash, so I'm going to keep saying potash. Has is another one of these super fertilizer compounds, and it did not go into an overshoot period like phosphate rock did. It has just its production output has just kept following the general upward demand curve, and so it is up to about 49 million tons per year as of last year. Rare earths, you can see when the upsurge really begins from production following, the surge of demand as we really dive headlong down the EVs and green energies rabbit hole. But we're starting to hit a bit of a bottleneck here, which will be slightly alleviated once the expanded operations in California get through, along with the project in Chile and the project in South Africa. And once we start extracting stuff out of that mine residue waste stuff from the iron mine in Kazakhstan. But for the moment, it's been bottlenecked off here, although it's still managed to climb up from a global output from mines of 375 up to about 390,000 tons per year. Rhenium did not update that graph, but availability or output from mines has generally been able to follow demand, as rhenium is pretty exclusively used in space stuff, in like rocket engines, and also in the nickel superalloys of jet engines and power plant turbines. Silver, global silver output from mines worldwide peaked in 2015 and has since declined down, lost about 10% of its output, but has managed to hold off here for the last 5 or 6 years and came in just short of 24,000 tons in 2025. Meanwhile, silver demand continues, surging and surging upwards, especially from the solar panel angle of things. And that's part of the reason why we saw things like this, this massive jump here. But that's where silver stands. Soda ash is a compound that we can make synthetically. It's just way cheaper to mine it, and it's also really abundant. And basically, all soda ash on the face of the earth that is mined in Wyoming, here in the US, and in, I believe, Western Turkey, but I'm not positive the exact location in Turkey. But soda ash has gone from under 10 million tons per year up to a bit of a overshoot that then corrected down here to around 18.5 million tons per year. Sulfur is effectively infinite, and predominantly we don't mine sulfur. We mostly get it as a byproduct of refining oil and gas. And so sulfur not mining, but just extraction in general, since it's not mining technically, has gone from 50 up to around 85 million tons a year, and it effectively just follows demand. Tantalum uh, is very rare, but is very critical for several components of circuit boards for computers, phones, other electronics, satellites, etc. And so tantalum availability follows price surges from, availability constrictions, and then falls back down, faces more price spikes that then cause mining expansions and further availability thus, and has remained flat at global output for the last 2 years at 2,500 tons. Tellurium, another critical component for various electronics, along with higher efficiency solar panels. And tellurium is another one where it's not mined. It is a byproduct that occurs within different types of copper ores or zinc and lead ores and can be extracted from them. it's just kind of pricey to do it. So a lot was usually coming from China because they offered the cheapest price, but now it's beginning to be done elsewhere. Tin has been on a rough plateau for about 20 years at around 300,000 tons per year. And tin is a critical component of indium tin oxide, thus is very critical to electronics. Little too many people's knowledge is used for tin plating, a coating of tin on the outside of various metals to prevent intrusion of air and any type of corrosion, and a variety of other things. Tungsten or wolfram has been on a plateau roughly around 80 to 85,000 tons per year for the last 15 years or so, or sorry, more about 10 years. Vanadium, critical for high strength steels as well, especially steel used in manufacturing equipment and tools that have to experience high pressure and or impact, has gotten up in waves as different price spikes have driven it over time or have driven mining expansion over time. And most recently, at the end of the 2010s, was surged up to around roughly the 110,000 tons per year area and came in right at 110,000 tons per year last year. Yttrium, critical component of LEDs, primarily, along with a few other niche chemistry uses that are important, is up around 15,000 tons per year and has predominantly followed price surges that came from demand surges that then drove mining expansion. And zinc has been on a rough plateau, slight decline over the last 10 plus years, and had declined from close to 14 down to around 12. But last year jumped back up to 13 million tons per year. Okay, that went on for way longer than I intended it to. So we are definitely not getting through the entire thing. I assume I've lost everybody anyways. Let's see. Oh no, way more people are still there than I thought would be. Ah, chug that water. Okay, so these graphs are way out of date. I forgot to update them last year. I'll update them soon. So these numbers are not all entirely accurate, but I promised I would show you guys the pie charts of how each metal and element break down by usage. So aluminum, the biggest usage, 35% of it is used for vehicles, both ground vehicles and aircraft, etc. Then for different types of packaging, whether foil, whether actual like casing that a lot of medication comes in, infrastructure and buildings, like the uh, ductwork and AC stuff and like fire escapes a lot of times. Transmission wires, the long distance power grid wires are actually aluminum. It only switches to copper once you get to the stuff that is inside of buildings or going directly into buildings. Various types of appliances, like for example, laundry machines, it will tend to be aluminum because that makes them weigh a lot less, so they're easier to move. Factory machinery that needs to be able to move easily tends to be made of aluminum, and then everything else falls into the 4% range. Antimony is down to it's 35% used in flame retardant chemicals. 33% is used in the specific lead alloy for lead acid batteries. It's hold on, I think it's like 92% lead, 6% antimony, and 2% tin, along with a micro additive of like 0.2% arsenic or something. It's used in the production of ceramics, glass, and rubber, and is also used in the lead alloy of ammunition and in some soldering compounds. Arsenic is predominantly used as wood preservative or termite poison. Chromium is predominantly used for steel alloys as one of the components of various types of non-corroding steel or stainless steel. Some is used as chemical catalyst, and some is used as other types of alloys with things other than iron. So nickel super alloys, aluminum alloys, etc. Copper, like I said, 60% is used for electric wire. As of 2024, it was down to only 20% used for plumbing and construction. About 15% is used in various components of different industrial machines and factories, and then 5% other. Gallium, 44% LEDs, 36% computers, phones, electronics, etc. 7% solar panels. That has definitely expanded over the last few years. 7% magnets, 6% other. Gold, to people's surprise, is still predominantly jewelry, about 45%. Coins and gold bars, and central banks and stuff is roughly 50% combined. And then computers and electronics is a bit under 8%. Helium is used for various types of critical scientific experiments, and then is used in the process of manufacturing computer processors or semiconductors as the chamber where the processor chips are made. Because the individual channels running through it are atom wide, there has to be no reactivity in that process, in the photolithography process. So uh, the room is flushed out of air and is filled with helium because helium displaces everything and does not react with anything. MRI coolant, lifting gas for blimps, balloons, and other things, general air purging, not including the semiconductor manufacturing processes, welding, leak detection, etc. And you might ask, if you are unaware, why isn't the helium, quote unquote, just reused and recycled? And that is because you cannot keep it. It escapes. Helium will escape through non existent gaps in whatever seal you try to form. And also, helium can actually just go through the walls of containers. Not quickly, but it will just leak out. It can actually like bypass the actual structure. So everything with helium, no matter what wizardry you seal it with, will leak out that helium. Iron, almost all of it is used to make steel. And then 2% is used as a chemical agent in the water purification process, that part of the process that allows us to treat and get rid of sewage in modern countries, and also clean water before it becomes drinking water. Lead, almost predominantly used for lead acid batteries for ground vehicles. A very tiny bit is actually consumed to make ammunition. Lithium, almost all of it is used to make batteries now. Manganese, 90% goes to make steel. Aluminum alloys get another 2%. Alkaline batteries, another 2%. Lithium batteries use about 1%, and then 5% is a mix of stuff. Mercury, 43% is still dental in countries and locales where they still use mercury fillings. 41% of it, the most actual critical use, is for certain types of relays and switches that are gravity driven. So stuff having to do with aircraft, with gyroscopes and altimeters and stuff. As mercury is the only metal that is a liquid, so it will drift with the tilt of an aircraft. And if it, then comes into contact with some particular point within the sensor thing, it will then set it off and like let you know that this is happening. And it's the only metal, apart from just being a liquid, that's not really affected magnetically in any way by any of the surrounding components. Molybdenum is majority used for steel, but I broke that down in this case into structural steel for buildings, general stainless steel overall, and then tool steel over here. Chemical catalyst, about 14%, nickel superalloys, about 12%. Nickel itself, 65%, is used for steels, predominantly stainless steels. 17% in 2024 was used for lithium batteries. I think it's slightly higher now, but it has plateaued for the moment. Nickel superalloys, about 5%, and then the rest of it breaks down. Niobium, 43%, gets used to make nickel superalloys, and 57 goes to high strength steels and ultra high strength steels. Platinum and palladium got 42% going to catalytic converters for ground vehicles, 32% for jewelry, 8% for various chemical catalysts, 3% gets used in oil and gas refining, and then 3% for computers and electronics, and 3% for medical stuff. Rhenium, almost all of it gets used for nickel superalloys, and then 15% of it gets used as an oil refining catalyst. Silver, you got electronics, 21%, computers, phones, etc. 19% used for solar panels. That amount has gotten larger almost definitely over the last 2 years. So this pie chart will be changing. Coins and bars and stuff, about 17%. Jewelry, about 17%. Genuine collector silverware. If you're not aware, the forks and spoons you own that are referred to as silverware are not made of silver. They're either made of steel or aluminum. Uh, Actual genuine silverware that's made of silver for fancy rich people who buy stuff like that. About 5% gets used for that, 4% for soldering, 2% for physical photography, and then 15% other. Soda ash, about 47.5% gets used to make glass, 29.3% used as general feedstock chemical for the production process of manufacturing all kinds of different end products. About 5% gets used in different soap compounds, flue and smokestack desulfurization for power plants, water purification 1%, and then a whole bunch of others. Tin, you got tin plating at 23%. Chemical catalysts, about 22%. Different types of alloys, about 11%. Soldering for electronics and plumbing, about 11%. Brass and bronze, aka your doorknobs and coat hangers, about 7%. And then all other uses, about 26. Tungsten is 60%, gets used to make metal carbides, different steel alloys and nickel superalloys, about 20%, and then tungsten, pure metal, tungsten itself, about 10%. Vanadium, 85% is used to make high strength steel alloys, especially, again, tool steels, steels that are going to be enduring high pressure and or high impact. And zinc, 60% is used to galvanize metal, most of which of that is then used is specifically used to galvanize steel, but 60% is used to apply a outer zinc coating to metal, which actually I can show you guys. Go to photography, go to here. We go actually right here. So a lot of outdoor infrastructure, you see this pattern, this like speckled looking pattern on this piece of outdoor infrastructure. That is a galvanized zinc coating that protects the iron abundant steel that is forming the actual infrastructure from oxidizing or reacting with the environment. Okay, that is all of those. And that took way more time than I would have assumed it would. I've been going for a while. Let's see. I doubt it's only been an hour and 15 minutes. I doubt the Super Bowl's over. Let's see how long I can handle going for. Is at the Super Bowl, they're doing 3 or 4 hours of work and each getting paid like $50 million for it. I'll do uh I don't know if I can go for 3 hours, but if I do go for 3 hours, I'll get $15 with no zeros after it. Ah, wow, we really still have people here. That is shocking. So it looks like everybody's dead. Okay. Let's see. What else can we go in through? Let's go. I mean, the one that's most popular, obviously. Let's go into the oil data. So in the oil production graphs, we'll just go through each one. In the oil production graphs, the ones that get shown in the monthly videos are only countries that currently produce above 150,000 barrels per day. Uh, there are plenty of countries that produce less and always produced less, and there are countries who produce less but at one time produced more. So just so you guys can get a general look over every single one of them, at least of all the ones that I've made, and you can mentally gather up from where, keep in mind the numbers, not just the graph shapes, where the general overall situation is. So this and all of the most of these are standardized to start at 1975, unless the country began oil production much later than that. And I do have long-term graphs for the few countries that have been producing oil since like the early 1900s, or in the case of the US, since 1859. But, anyways, this is the smaller of the two Congos, and this is Algeria. I also try in most of these to put the country's actual name at the top. So, Algezer, the big gap in the middle there was from their civil war. But so, yeah, they've had ups and downs. Then the big gap from the Civil War. Then their all-time peak was at about 1.4. Then Angola, who is managing to still hold on above one for the moment, but not can't keep that up forever. Argentina, in the thousands, not millions. They will be going up over a million in a couple of years, though. But they had their traditional conventional production peak back at about 800, which they have now surpassed because of the Vaca Muerta shale. Australia has seen itself go down from their peak down to now getting close to only 200,000. Azerbaijan had their peak at 1.1, and as of this month's update, actually, they are now the video that I just released is technically out of date. They're now below 550. They came in at like 548 or 549 for thousands. Brazil is one of the ones that's just going up and up for still the next little bit. It's the pace at which they go up is going to be slowing down soon, but they're still going to be going up for a bit. They're now up over four. Cameroon in West Africa came online in the late 70s and peaked around like 180 or so, and has since declined down to around the upper mid 50s. Canada, primarily because of the tar sands, is now up over five and will be, you can see the curve kind of starting to level off, but it will inch its way up closer to six before it kind of plateaus there for a few decades. Chad over in interior Africa, they jumped online in the early 2000s, peaked up over 200,000, and they've managed to stay at a wobbly plateau ever since then in the lower 100,000s. China, Zhongguo, has managed to hold on. It's still clinging on there in the lower fours, but it doesn't have a lot left to work with. It has a lot of offshore territory, but a lot of that's going to be an issue because of the upcoming Taiwan conflict, and also their stuff offshore has proven to not be as large as they would have liked. Colombia over in South America, at their second peak, driven by the 2000s oil price surge, they managed to get just up over 1 million. And they've been stair stepping their way down since then. And the country itself just banned all further oil and gas exploration, etc. So it's not like they're going to be going back up. Cote d'Ivoire has come to life and died a few times through various rounds of internal strife and civil war. But recently, they've jumped up to 80 or 90, but then one of their smaller fields had to shut down, but is now coming back online, so they'll be jumping up closer to 100 again over the next few months. Denmark was, to many people's surprise, actually an oil producer for a bit, because they do have their share of the North Sea, and they peaked and naturally went into decline, and they've kind of been holding out around 70,000 for the last 5 years or so. Ecuador had their plateau peak area around 550 that they've now been on their descent down from. Egypt, Masr or Mizrim, had their highest level up around 900,000, and they've made their way down to only about 500. Equatorial Guinea had a natural conventional peak up around 350 and has since declined down to around 80. Gabon working their way back upwards, back up over 200,000. Ghana peaked up over 200, declined down to 160, jumped back up with enhanced recovery efforts up to 190, is now back down to 180. But a new field coming online, I think next year we'll be bumping them up to 250. Guyana is up around 900,000, and their next new field in the second half of this year will be coming online and bumping them up to or over 1.1 million. India has kind of wobbled around between 600 and 800,000, and at the moment is around 600. Indonesia went further back than this. They're one of the long-term ones that I have long-term graph for. But they held around 1.5 million for 3 decades before hitting the end of their capabilities, and they've been declining since then, now down to only around 600,000. Iran held a 6 million barrel per day plateau. Revolution happens. Iran-Iraq war kept them from going back up. And then they finally were able to get up to about 4, but that's about the highest they could hold. Then sanctions, sanctions off, sanctions again, sanctions off. And because of how degraded things are and their lack of replacement equipment from Russia, they've only managed to go back up to 3.4 this time, from which they have now declined back down to 3.2. Iraq is going to be going up over 5 relatively soon. At the moment, they're up at about 4.6 or 4.7. Italia has undulated up and down around 100,000 barrels per day or so for the last 3.5 decades. Kazakhstan has finally made it up over 2. Kuwait is being really slow about their return back up to their 3 million barrel per day plateau. Libya is continuing to restore production post Civil War and wants to at least get back up to a bit over 1.5 million, if not getting back up to their olden days 2 million barrel per day plateau. Malaysia has gone down from their peak close to 800. They were down to the 400s, but some enhanced recovery efforts brought them back up into the lower 500s recently. Mexico hit their highest point up at about 3.5 and has meandered their way down into the upper ones, but they They have a number of fields offshore in the Gulf that will have come online and will be coming online. And each time a new one does, it sort of gives them a bit of a bump surge up like that one there. And that then, they resume declining from that. And they're lined up in such a way to where they should stay in the upper 1 millions for at least the rest of the 2020s. Niger has just become a legitimate oil producer recently and is outputting about 110,000 barrels per day, although it has to flow through a pipeline through Benin, who they have disputes with. Nigeria is capable of holding 20 or 2 million barrels per day. No, sorry, no one's capable of holding 20 million barrels per day. But a lot of mismanagement, degradation, terrorist attacks, etc., have degraded their infrastructural capacity. So they've recovered from that a bit, and they're back up to about 1.5. Uh, Norge, sorry, Norge, not Norgay. Norge is around, or sorry, was around 3.5 million at their height. They fell down to 1.5, but moving into uh, their Arctic stuff and their mid coastline as well, they've been able to get back up over and hold right around 2. Oman is once again starting to bring itself a bit up over 1. Peru, at its highest point, got close to 200,000, but it just doesn't have the stuff there. It shares the topography that would be indicative with Ecuador, but the rock layer formations that are uh, well suited to holding oil reservoirs do not continue under Peru as far. They only stretch into Peru a little bit, so that's why Peru never really had as much. But they've declined from 200,000 down to under 50. Qatar, the peninsula nation, the Persian Gulf, is up here, holding out around 1.3. Romania, after getting up to 200 or 250 before World War II, was devastated by bombing during World War II to cut Hitler off from his oil supply, and recovered over time afterwards up into the mid 70s, up to around 300,000, and has since naturally declined all the way down to around 50,000. Russia, Russia, and this, once you go back before the USSR collapse, this is still just Russia's component of it. This isn't USSR production. Total USSR production was about 12.5. But Russia fell after the collapse. Outside oil industries came in and rescued their production, brought them up here, gradually pushed them up and up and up. But there were limits because Russia's fields have been pumping for a long time. They started in the 1890s. Then you had COVID, bounce back from COVID, and Ukraine invasion, customer absence, and departure of the outside oil companies, and thus Russia's inability to hold everything together since then, which has seen them decline. But they've managed to get to a point where their rate of decline is decently less than it was in the earlier portions. And they're around 8.5 million barrels per day at the moment. Saudi Arabia has brought themselves back up to their 10 million barrel per day plateau. Senegal is a bit above 100,000, just jumping on scene in 2024. They're at 101 or 102. South Sudan got the better portion of the Sudanese oil when the country split, and they were holding around 150. They dropped down to much lower levels when northern Sudan, entered its civil war because for a time the oil pipelines were cut off by fighting. But the fighting has moved away from those areas, so South Sudan is able to export the oil again, so it's back up to 150. Regular Sudan was at around 500,000 barrels per day before the split. They were already on their terminal decline. Then they split, and North Sudan was left with the lesser portion of the oil, about 100,000 barrels per day. And since then, they have seen decay and decline down to now only being around 30,000. Syria peaked at 600,000 and was already on decline before the Civil War. But once the Civil War started, they almost dropped off the map and have since been able to restore a little bit. But because of how field degradation when fields are offline works, they would still never be able to actually restore their production all the way up to the 350 or so that it had declined down to before 2011 happened. This graph is slightly outdated. They have almost hit 100,000 barrels per day again, though. Thailand jumped on scene in the 80s and brought themselves up to the mid 200s for a decade and a half. Dropped down from that, have now recovered a bit and are hanging out around 150. Trinidad and Tobago was in the 200s for a while, but they hit the end of their abilities and because their territory is small to begin with, and so they've declined over time now down to only about 50. Tunisia at its highest point, Tunisia never had much oil and gas to begin with. At its highest point, it got up close to 125, but has since declined down to about 25 itself. Turkmenistan at its highest point got up close to 250 and has since been more down around 200. The UAE was up at a plateau of 3 and is now bringing itself up to a plateau of 4 as it's done following the OPEC marching orders anymore. And it might even just leave the group altogether in the coming years, as many other members have done, like Qatar, Angola, Ecuador. The UK, was once up at 2.5 at the heights of the North Sea, but all the way down here now. And unlike Norway, the UK does not have that much oil and gas bearing area left to work with. So the UK is not really going to keep chugging. What the? Are you not loading? There we go. Thank you. You're supposed to load. Ukraine, at its highest point in the 80s was at about 90,000. There was not a lot there to begin with, and had declined down to around 30. And then 2022 happened, and they have ceased oil production. USA declining from its 10 million barrel per day initial peak, undulated at 8, then declined all the way down to only 5. Then through shale and Gulf of Mexico stuff and stuff back up home in Alaska, climbed all the way back up to where it's peaking now in my expected range of the mid or upper 13s. And it has twice touched 18.3 and since declines back down under 13.7. Venezuela, uh, capable of a 3 million barrel per day plateau, and they could hold that for many decades. And the Orinoco Belt is actually honestly capable of 5 or 6. But that would require someone other than Venezuela doing the work, which was the reason for the whole Venezuela operation that was recently performed. As Maduro was removed, several dudes were killed, the vice president took over, and she immediately acquiesced to every oil related demand that the US made. So, yes, it absolutely was about the oil. They dropped a little bit post operation, but since then, over the last few weeks, they are actually back up at about 1 million. Vietnam came online in the 80s, got up to the mid 300,000s, and eventually reached the end of their ability to maintain that and have been on their way down since and are down to around 170. Yemen was already naturally declining before the country fell apart in 2014, and then has subsequently been undergoing hospital and kindergarten bombings by Saudi Arabia on a nearly daily basis. So even if Yemen stabilized, it would not go back up to any large numbers. Uh, Based on the mix up, maybe it might be able to get back up to like 200 or 250, but no way to be sure. That looks like that's the end of all the ones I have a graph for, which is almost all of them. Oh, there's this dude. Bro, you have, it doesn't show me the time here, but you have a lot of stuff to scroll back through. I don't know. Why are you asking me? The stream is literally titled Not the Super Bowl. Then I also have these. Uh, you have individual oil production by U.S. states. I will try to do this for like provinces and states of other countries somewhat eventually. But back up home in Alaska, we peaked in the late 80s at 2 million, declines down to just under 500, but we have stopped declining. And with all the new stuff coming online on the North Slope, we are ticking back up again. And within a number of years, we should actually be closer to about 800,000. California, well, hovered around a million for a few decades, but since then has been on terminal decline and is all the way down to only about 250. Colorado split into conventional and shale. Conventionally, peaked up close to 200 back in the 50s or 60s. Conventional has declined all the way down to like only 50,000. Shale boomed up and is up over 400,000 though. Gulf of Mexico went through its one price surge, then uh, dipped, then the next price surge drove it up, and the next price surge drove it up. And uh, if I had extended it after here to 2026, at least the start of this year, it technically right now is actually above 2 million barrels per day at 2.03. Illinois, not a country people think, or sorry, not a state people think of as an oil producing state, was once up above 200,000 in the 60s, has since declined and depleted all the way down to only like 10,000 barrels per day. Kansas was once up over 300,000, has since declined and depleted down to only around 70. Louisiana, onshore, this is the state of Louisiana, not the Gulf, not the waters, at its height was over a million barrels per day in the 60s and 70s, has since declined all the way down to under 100,000. Mississippi was once close up to 200, has declined down now to only about 30. Sorry, rubbing something out of my eye. New Mexico's conventional production peaked at about 400,000 in the 70s, has since declined to only about like 150. Shale production, you can see there, mega boomed and is almost all of New Mexico's current oil production. North Dakota, conventional production peaked in the 80s at around 200 and has since declined down close to nothing. Pretty much everything coming out of North Dakota is stuff from the Bakken Shale. Ohio, conventional production peaked once in the 60s and once in the 80s, never really getting to 50,000 and has since declined to under 10. But liquids accompanying the natural gas from Ohio shale has driven its oil or liquids production up to a total close to 150. Oklahoma peaked conventionally at around 600,000 back in the 70s, has since declined down to only around 100,000. And shale peaked and has since declined and is now plateaued at around 400. Texas peaked in the 70s, close to 4 million, and conventionally has since declined down to under one, around 800,000 or so. Shale, Texas shale, you see sprung to life here and jumped up through the various points up close to 6 million, but has begun coming down as shale has reached its limits. Wyoming, conventional production in green, peaked and plateaued for a bit at 400,000 and then began to decline and has continued declining and is now down to only about 100,000. So about 2/3 of Wyoming's current oil production is from shale. Is that it? Huh. I thought I had. I guess that is all the major producing states. I thought I had others in there. I think I forgot Utah. I forgot Mormon land. I'm sorry, everyone. I'll add Mormon lands another time. For the long-term ones, for countries that have been producing since well before 1975, here's what Canada looks like full timeline. Came to life in the 30s and then really came to life around 1950 and has basically just been going upwards since then. Indonesia sprung to life with a few hundred thousands in the 20s and then through the 30s. And then you see where World War II happens there, obviously, comes back to life, begins climbing up, jumps up, and then holds their plateau for about 3 decades before hitting their decline. Iran started in the 20s, down at only a couple 100,000, came up to like over 500,000, dropped in the 50s during the internal strife, uh, close to civil war. Not sure if the Iranians consider it a civil war, but then came back and then sprung to life through the 50s and 60s, all the way up until hitting 6 million in the 70s, which it could have held on to if it weren't for the revolution causing that precipitous drop. And then it's history over here that you're familiar with. Iraq came to life in the 30s and then went down during World War II, then came back to life in the later 40s, and then had steady development up through the 50s and 60s and 70s, and then Iran-Iraq War, and came back to life, and then invasion of Kuwait, and started coming back to life, but then started dropping down uh, because of all the internal stuff, especially the attempted genocide of the Kurds, up until the invasion, which caused it to then drop further, and then finally the outside oil industry took control, and that's when you see this happen. That repeating pattern of behavior from Saddam was the actual reason for the 2003 invasion. It was about oil, just people tend to not understand the how and why behind that phrase. Mexico sprang to life in the early 1900s, even got up to 500,000 until their civil war started, and they were in turmoil for quite a bit. But then, post World War II, they started coming up and hit a snag, started coming up a bit further, snagged a bit, and then they jumped to life once you crossed over the 1975 line. Nigeria only went a little bit back further than the 1975. They spun to life right around 1960 or so. Saudi Arabia started producing right around 1930 or in the 1930s. And then once you get past World War II, and initially Britain was the one doing the development, once people were able to actually focus on doing stuff post war, then you see them pick up like this and they go up, dip a bit, and they go up and up and up, and into the 1975 plus range that you're familiar with. The USA, the longest runner on the planet, has been producing since 1859, but only crossed a reasonable graphable threshold in the 1880s or 1890s. I think 1885 is when it passed over 100,000 barrels per day. And so then a little climb upwards, a bit, and then once we pass this area, once automobiles and liquid fuel become a genuine thing, then you start to tick upwards and upwards and upwards and upwards. See the depression stall right there, and then upwards and upwards and upwards and upwards and upwards to the peak in at 10, conventional peak at in 1970. Then down to the undulation, then down to only 5, then the shale-driven upward spring until the peak there, and now starting to come down. Is that all of the long terms? That's all of the long term ones. Let's see. Uh, we're we're not invading again. The goal was accomplished. The goal was to get the oil properly, was to get the oil actually up to the country's capabilities and maintain it there, to stop having the undulations, because the system does not want a unstable oil supply. Uh, let's see. Also show these. Show the minimal. These show global gasoline demand and the amount displaced by EVs, to show how minimal it is. EVs have only displaced about 1 million barrels per day of gasoline demand that would have otherwise existed. Whereas vehicle fuel efficiency has actually, since that the fuel efficiency demand started surging when prices started going up in the mid 2000s, the global shift over to much more fuel efficient cars and fuel efficient other vehicles as well has actually displaced or prevented way more gasoline demand that would otherwise exist than EVs have displaced. Were it not for the massive upsurge in vehicle fuel efficiency and the advent of like hybrid vehicles and stuff, were it not for the invasion of the Prius and the Hyundai Ioniq, etc., uh, global gasoline demand would otherwise be up around 33 or 34 million barrels per day instead of the 25 million barrels per day that it is currently at. But if you then stack the displaced demand from EVs onto total oil demand worldwide, the effect is, as you can see, effectively non-existent. Uh, let's see. Yeah, the demand graphs, and I think, oops, no, I did not mean to open iTunes. Oh, now it's going to lag. It's going to lag. X out. It's going to lag. Let's see. Uh, if it is going, if it is going the long way around Africa, that is probably because it wants to avoid it probably wants to avoid being potentially uh, targeted, I guess, maybe by Houthi like rocket strikes, if they're still doing those. I thought they kind of stopped because they're primarily don't like Israel, but they also don't really like Turkey either. Kind of see Turkey as like a Muslim trader country, or like effectively just a Western country as opposed to a Muslim country. So they're probably not really wanting to take that risk. Here's the global graph of oil demand, still climbing up around 104 now. Here's Algeria's oil demand, getting close to 500,000. Argentina, all over the place with their various economic booms and implosions. Australia, Austria, Österreich, Belgium, Belgique, Brazil, uh, has kind of been wobbly and even going down in totality, just like their economy for the most part, ever since the mid 2010s, because they've never really put it back together since then. I'm not actually familiar with like Brazil's situation. I don't know why they like fell apart in the 2010s and have just been on kind of like a semi off and on death spiral since then. I don't actually know what happened. Canada, steady for the last 15 years around a demand level of 2.5 million barrels per day. Chile starting to plateau out at 400,000. China, Shunghua, is starting to peak or plateau around 17 million barrels per day. Although, in the economic fallout from the attempted Taiwan invasion, once they make that move, they're going to see a massive contraction in demand, just like they're going to see a massive contraction in GDP and everything else. Colombia in domestic consumption is now up over 500,000 barrels a day. Czech Republic, Chesco, is hovering in the lower 200s. Ecuador is up to or a bit over 300. Egypt, Masha or Mizrim, is up in the 900s now. Finland, Sumi, has declined gradually from 250 down to a bit under 200. France was once at their highest point, up around 2.5. Then they dropped, rebounded up to 2, and have since declined down to around 1.6. Germany, Deutschland, at their highest point was at around 3, but they've declined down to around 2. Greece, Hellas, is or was once up in the 400s, but after they economically died, they have not emerged from their grave really. And so their oil consumption similarly has remained down here around 300,000. Hungary, Magyarország, declined, then has now come back up to around 200,000 barrels per day. Consumption, again, we're doing consumption, not production. India is almost at 6. Actually, it's been a month, so they have probably now exceeded 6. But last month, when the numbers came out, they were at 5.98 million barrels per day. Indonesia is up into the 2 millions. Most recently, they came in at 2.4, I think. Iran, for domestic consumption, is close to 2 million. They're usually around like 1.8. Iraq, in domestic consumption, is getting close to 1 million barrels per day. They're usually around 900,000. Italy was once up at 2 million. Their demand has declined down to about 1.3. Japan, Nihon, has declined from 6 all the way down to only about 3.5. Mix of the fuel efficiency surge since the mid 2000s, continued deference towards mass public transit, and also the fact that their society is rapidly aging and a huge chunk of their society is now over the age of 50. Kazakhstan, for their domestic consumption, is up to 500,000. Kuwait, I have not updated in a while, and wow, this looks bad. That is a horrible shade. I need to fix that. But they're usually in the mid 300s. Libya is around 200,000 in present day. Malaysia is usually up around 800,000. Mexico was once up at 2 million, but their recovery in terms of oil demand domestically post-COVID crash has slowed down, but they have just recently crossed back up over 1.8 million barrels per day. Morocco, or Maroc, is up over 300,000. Netherlands has declined from over 1 million down to about 900,000. New Zealand has not returned to their pre-COVID consumption levels. They're staying around, looks like the 170s. Nigeria is up or in the around 700 now, actually. Norway is in the mid 200s usually. Oman is up around 200,000. Pakistan was once up at 600, but there are various economic or internal implosions. I've seen them crash, recover a bit, crash, recover again. And it looks like they're starting to flatten off here. So you can kind of see the pattern that's probably coming next again for like a third time. Peru is up to about 300,000 for their demand. Philippines is up at about 500,000. Poland, Polska, is up close to 800,000. Portugal peaked in demand over 300,000, but has declined down to more around 250 or actually a bit under it. Qatar is kind of plateauing off in the mid 300s demand wise, usually a bit above 350. Romania has declined in domestic demand from 400,000 barrels per day down to only around 250. Russia, during the Soviet times, at their highest consumption point, they were about 5 million out of the USSR's total 7.5 million barrels per day of oil demand. Russia was about 5 million of that. They collapsed when the USSR collapsed, but their demand grew back upwards with their economy up until COVID. Then, after COVID, coming close to 4, then Ukraine invasion and the economic fallout. And they've had various ups and downs since then. And most recently, they were back down a bit under 3. Saudi Arabia in present day fluctuates wildly between 2 and 3 because they still generate a decent amount of power from oil fired power plants. And so their demand for oil goes way up during the summer because their electricity demand goes way up. Singapore peaked at about 1.5, has since declined down to more around like 1.3. South Africa was up at 600 at their highest point, but as they've begun their death spiral, they're starting to not really go back up there. South Korea, Hanguk, has leveled off here a bit short of 3 at about 2.8. And given their demographic setup, they are about to tip over just like Japan did. Spain, España, peaked at 1.6, dropped, recovered, but has now plateaued at about 1.3. Sverige or Sverige, Sweden has dropped from about 600,000 down to domestic consumption of only about 300,000. And there should be more, but for some reason it's stopping. There we go. Switzerland, has declined from closer to 300 down to now only around 200. Taiwan held at around a million for their demand level for about a decade and a half, but since 2020 has dropped down close to 800,000. Thailand has grown up to, but is now plateauing off at about 1.2 or 1.3. Turkey is continuing to grow, just has slowed down a bit, but has gotten up over 1.3. The UAE has seemingly plateaued, but it's plateaued at about 1.2 and a half. So that was eating into their export ratio, which is why they're pushing their plateau from 3 million barrels per day of production up to 4. The UK at its highest was up at 2, but dropped, and did a big drop with COVID and never returned to its pre-COVID levels and has instead stayed around 1.5. Ukraine, once they had a consumption level up around like 800 or 900,000 in the 80s before the Soviet collapse, dropped down to 250, came back up to 300, dropped down to 250, and stayed around there and had different fluctuations. The US grew up to and has basically undulated around 20 million barrels per day here for the last 25 years or so. Venezuela peaked at close to 800, collapsed. Its demand collapsed when the country collapsed down to as low as 250 and got back up to about 350, but haven't gotten any updates from them for a couple of years. And Vietnam has grown up to almost 800,000 barrels per day of domestic oil consumption. That should be the end of the list. Yes. Okay. Let's see. Nothing else on either end. What other ones do we have that we can go through here? Oh, yeah, you can look at these. So also have these where you can compare the you can see a pie chart of how it's consumed. So this was supposed to be million barrels per day, but I forgot it automatically puts the pie charts in percentages. But so, oh, the labels. Sorry, the labels, the actual number labels are the million barrels per day. The percentages are just the percentages. But so yeah, these are not from the most recent data. This was for 2024. Out of for that year, about 102.5 million barrels per day or so of demand. Uh, Diesel fuel comprised 29 million barrels per day of that. 25 million barrels per day of that was gasoline. 8 million barrels per day was jet fuel. And fuel efficiency of aircraft has actually played a role as well. Jet fuel demand worldwide would actually be closer to 9 million barrels per day, if not for the increase in aircraft fuel efficiency over the last 20 years with the advent of aircraft like the CS 100 and 300 or the A350. 7.2 million barrels per day in 2024, mind you, were used to make plastic. 6.6 million barrels per day were used as marine fuel. 6.5 were used to make petrochemicals. And for the plastic petrochemicals distinction, the distinction is effectively just the plastic umbrella is effectively all the stuff made out of oil that is solid. Petrochemicals is liquid for the most part, mind you. Uh, Tar and asphalt for roads and roofs was 3.3 million barrels per day used for that. Uh, the closest we can get is the 2.1%, so a bit over 2 million barrels per day used for LPG, for liquid petroleum gas tanks, for cooking, for rural heating, etc. 400,000 barrels per day used to make rubber, and then everything else about 14.8 million barrels per day. And then to save on time, I won't go through every single country, but I can show you some. So out of that 25 million barrels per day of gasoline, 9 million barrels per day of that gasoline consumption globally, or close to 40%, is just the US. 4 million barrels per day of diesel is consumed by the US, 1.7 million barrels per day of jet fuel, 1.1 million barrels per day of plastic. Uh, let's see, is about 1/5 of the number shown. So that would mean marine fuel or fuel for large ships and vessels, about 400,000 barrels per day, about 400 or 300,000. Same for tar and asphalt. And then smaller and smaller numbers afterwards. See some others like compare versus China and then versus some random Euro country. So China, a lot of countries you'll find it inverted where their diesel consumption is higher than their gasoline consumption. The US is an exception because of the personal automobile obsession. For China, out of their 17 million barrels per day of consumption, 4 million barrels per day was diesel, 3.5 was gasoline, 2.2 was plastic, 1.8 was petrochemicals, 1 million barrels per day was jet fuel, 900,000 barrels per day was marine fuel, uh, something like 500,000 barrels per day was tar and asphalt, and everything else was 3. And then uh, the UK, some random Euro country, yeah, 700,000 barrels per day out of the UK's 1.5 million was diesel. About 300,000 was gasoline. 200,000 was jet fuel. 100,000 was marine fuel. 100,000 was tar and asphalt, and 200,000 for everything else. So if you want to look through all of those, they're all there. But I've been going for a while, and no one wants to listen to me talk forever. So Ugh, let me drink some more water, which I'm running out of. And there is nothing from anybody. Okay, so did oil, metals mining, economic data. If you look at prices of things adjusted over time, adjusted for inflation, you can see the truth behind stuff. So, for those of us like myself now in the 30s who uh, may eventually hear questions about why they haven't somehow earned and bought a house yet, you know, the even inflation adjusted to current equivalent value, and thus, you can proportionalize it to like your modern day earnings. Yes, actually, houses in the present day uh, are, even when you factor in the equivalencies, are three times uh, as expensive equivocally than they were back in like the 50s golden age. It legitimately would take three times as much work to actually be able to legitimately afford one. The only reason I'm not going to be homeless in the distant future is purely because my parents have a house that I'm going to inherit. Natural gas, the price of natural gas over time, adjusted for inflation. I have not updated this one outwards all the way to this year yet, but the two big blizzards and stuff and supply crunches in the early 2000s, you could see those price spikes adjusted to inflation equivalently went up into the lower 20s per thousand cubic feet, uh, even though the at the time nominal price was about 14 and 13. During that one megastorm at the end of 2021, start of 2022, it went up to 9, which in current dollars translated to a bit over, or would translate to a bit over 10. And just recently, during this most recent storm, they shot up to like 8 or something. Price of oil over time. This is what it works out to. So let's see. The sudden jump upwards as demand surges post World War II, supply glut over time, and then the embargoes and the various Israel conflicts in the Middle East. And at the height, it went up to $42 per barrel, which equivocal to money of right now today would be the equivalent of about 170. And the 2008 $147 per barrel price surge would be equivalent to about 215 or so in current dollars. Price of silver, the most recent price surge that went up to $118 per ounce, uh, long surpassed the inflation adjusted value of the 40 something dollar per ounce price surge in 2011, which in 2026 dollars would equal out to about $62 per ounce. The 1979/1980 mega price spike, though, is equal to about $153. So have not reached an equivalent to that enormous price surge yet. And US median or real the real quote unquote average, because if you include billionaires, then the average gets enormously skewed to saying false things like the average American is earning like 90K a year, which is not remotely true. Uh, some of us are earning about maybe 5% of that. Median income over time kind of hit a drop, then rebound, but overall has been on a kind of plateau since the 70s at around 40,000 per year. Had a bit of a boost at the end of the 2010s, but then COVID happened, and since the 2020s, it's just been flat here again. So, it was a fun old time through the 50s and 60s, but then nah, it's been relatively the same. Uh, equ- uh, Equivalent value wise, price adjusted for inflation. Obviously, the actual number has gone up, in the sorry, like in the late 90s, my dad was earning like 50K a year from his Air Force job, and now he's earning like, I don't know, 100K a year or something. Uh, but so that's a income doubling over time, or average income over time. He didn't switch jobs to like some ridiculously high paying job. He's still doing like personnel and like managerial stuff and everything, because he's always loved dealing with people, but not in the way you think. He likes making inefficiencies and problems cease being inefficiencies and problems. But while for him, my dad as an example, his income has technically doubled since the 90s. The price of since it's the earliest thing I remember looking at the price of a candy bar on a store shelf, for example, I remember seeing stuff for, like 30, 40 cents in the 90s when I was a kid. Now that same stuff is like $4, so it's not really going up according to cost. Price of gold adjusted to inflation has well shot above even its inflation adjusted equivalents of the past, long since surpassing them with its nearly reaching $5,600 per ounce a few weeks ago. It's back down to only, in quotation marks, $4,800 an ounce. But even that is still well above its highest ever inflation adjusted equivalency. The spring upwards towards, I think, $700 per ounce in the late 70s, uh, in modern dollars would be the equivalent of a bit over 3,000. Price of gasoline specifically over time actually went down, inflation adjusted, but now has gone back up, but is now staying around roughly the 3 to 4 area in an undulation. Electricity was inflation adjusted equivocally more expensive in the past until it began spreading out and becoming a far more common thing. And, the whole economy of scale, whatever, came into effect and wound its way down to its lowest point in the 90s and early 2000s. And since then, crept up a little bit, but has stayed roughly around here, inflation adjusted, like equivalent dollars wise. And this is for stuff in the US. Price of copper over time did surpass or actually, no, sorry, even the jump up to $6.32 did not surpass the various African civil wars that had a lot of output disruption back in the 60s and 70s. At the highest point, I think in modern dollars, the jump up towards like 70 cents back then would be equal to about $6.40 something cents now. So the copper price surge a few weeks ago came very close, but did not actually hit it. And price of bread over time. I could only get back to 1960, but inflation adjusted came down until the 80s and stayed there for a bit, jumped up, dropped, jumped up, and was hovering a bit under 2 until just this only goes up to 2024. These last 2 years into this year, now 2026, it has jumped back up over to uh, by over like 12% or so. A tiny amount of money, but a decent percentage. At the store the other day, the cheapest loaf brand was $2.35, and that is all of those. Did we get anything else? I guarantee you that that stuff is either nearly expired or has probably been relabeled, and they are desperate to like get rid of it to make room for something else, but they really don't want to make 0 cents off of it. And that would not be a first time thing. Like the multiple times actually over just the last few months, we've when we've gone to the store, there have been not candy, there have been actual meat products. We've seen multiple like on the same shelf, as in it wasn't just one snuck in there. There have been multiple like rows of meat products that were like months past their date that were just still openly being sold. So, uh, one, heads up. Two, for a context, I guarantee you they do not care. It's Walmart brand candy. You answered your own question then. If it's Walmart brand, then that kind of is a self-answering question. Let's see. How long can I keep going? Populations. I just recently did this one. Was not a popular video, but I started making, instead of just country ones, I started doing individual state population graphs, and I will do these for states and provinces of other countries apart from just the US too. If your country is one that actually like makes data available, if it's not, I'm sorry, you're screwed. There's nothing I can do. Uh, so running through these, Alabama has, still increased overall over time, just really slowly. It's gone from 3 up to a bit over 5 over the last 76 years. Alaska, back up home, we had upsurge, then flat, climb, upsurge, flat, climb a bit, climb. I came in right around here, then went flat, stayed at a nice stable, not too populated, but not too underpopulated either, 750 or so. Right around here, unfortunately, that's where I leave, and I went into exile where I still am today, uh, and has stayed right a bit below 750,000. Arizona has gone from 1 million up to almost 8 million. This is a bad idea. Stop moving to Arizona. This is not going to end well. uh, Enormous, ridiculous levels of water and electricity demand for literally everything. People, businesses, factories that make water intensive products that are being built in Arizona for some reason. Like, I don't understand how anyone can be this stupid, but apparently we, humanity, collectively are. Arkansas very gradually has made its way up from 2 up to about 3. It had that stall in the 70s and 80s that you're going to see this pattern in many states when the manufacturing decline happened and the manufacturing industry started moving a bunch of stuff overseas and shut a lot of stuff down. California was growing for the longest time up until the later 2010s. It's kind of plateaued off a bit short of 40 million. And most recently, it came over the course of last year, it went up by only about 100,000 from 39.4 up to 39.5. Colorado has basically steadily grown over time. They had a short little bit of a stop in the 80s, but not really that affected by it. They've gone from 1.5 up to just over 6 million. Connecticut was growing right up until the 70s, and then it stopped and really kind of barely grew, then stopped again in the 90s, kind of barely grew, and barely stopped dead through most of the 2010s, and has just started growing again since the last like 3 or 4 years, and has gone up over 3.5 million. The city of Washington, D.C., as it is a separate thing. It's not like a city within Virginia or within Maryland. That's the only reason why it's put here as a separate thing. It had its highest population uh, back during post World War II and during a lot of the Cold War, when there was a lot higher staffing levels at the Pentagon. Basically, is the conclusion you can draw from that. Declined all the way down uh, towards the late 90s, but then came back up, froze, came back up, and has undulated a bit around 700,000 since then. Delaware was growing, had a short bit of the 70s stall like some others, but then has been growing again since then and is up to about 1.1 million. Florida, another not really bright idea. You know, sinking state, hurricane beating stick, brutally hot, uh, destroying wonderful ecosystems to build ridiculous tropical getaways. But anyways, has gone and gone and gone and is all the way up to 24 million now because it's the state where everybody teleports to when they reach 65 years of age, apparently. Georgia, the state of Georgia has grown and hit an acceleration in the 80s and 90s before coming back to their original speed and has gone from under 4 up to over 11 million people. Hawaii was growing up until the 2010s, since which it has gone flat between 1.4 and 1.5 million people. Idaho was barely growing, grew a bit, stalled in the 80s like a number of other places, but then resumed growing and has kept the same general pace up to now being over 2 million. Illinois, you can really see the 70s and 80s manufacturing decline play out there. As the jobs stopped, so did the population growth. Only resumed once you get close to the 90s. And since then, it's kind of curved off into a plateau uh, between around 12.5 million or so. Indiana saw the same deal with the stall in the 70s and 80s before resuming growing very gradually, is now up to about 7 million. Iowa was barely moving, contracted in the 80s, resumed growing, but again at a very snail, barely moving pace, is now up around 3.2 million. Kansas had its stall in the 60s, but then resumed growing again very gradually after that, and has almost barely budged in the last 10 years, but has made it up over 3 million people. Kentucky was declining before growing a bit, growing faster, hit the 70s and 80s stall, resumed growing, and has reached about 4.5 million people. Louisiana was growing up until the 80s and stopped, contracted, grew a bit, contracted post Katrina, and then rebounded, but has plateaued off and has not really moved since then. They're around 4.5 million. Maine was barely growing, barely moving until around the 70s. Then it started going, stalled in the 90s, started going again, stalled late 2000s, early 2010s, and has been growing again since then and is up at about 1.4. Maryland was growing up until the stall of the 70s and the 80s, resumed growing, and has slowed down in its pace since then, has recently made it up above 6 million in the last few years. Massachusetts, the state I'm originally from, where I was born in, on Cape Cod, lived there until almost age 12, grew up until the stall of the 70s and the 80s, then resumed, stalled a bit, resumed, stalled a bit, resumed, stalled a bit, resumed, and is now up at about 7 million. Uh, Thankfully, were I ever to return to Cape Cod, which I mean, I would also consider that apart from just Fairbanks, Alaska, but if I ever did return to Cape Cod, if I had like some obscene amount of money somehow, like, I was like an NFL player in the Sports Ball Bowl for some reason getting $50 million for 3 hours of work, I would buy, apart from, having my parents' house, I would buy the old childhood condo I grew up in on Cape Cod. Cape Cod, thankfully, has not ballooned with more and more people. It's stayed steady around 200,000 for the last 30 years. Michigan, you can really see the manufacturing decline hit here. 70s, 80s, bit of recovery in the 90s, but has not moved for the last 25 years. Stayed right around 10 million. Minnesota basically kept the same rough growth pattern from 3 up to about 6 over the last 76 years. Mississippi was doing whatever, grew a little bit, stopped, grew a little bit, and has been on a plateau and a bit of a decline since then, staying under 3. But I mean, that's like KKK Central, so I wouldn't exactly want to live there anyways. Missouri has very gradually grown over time from 4 up over 6 million. Montana has had stair step growth. They went up, stopped, went up, took a step, went up, took a step, and went up, 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 and are now about over 1.1 million. Nebraska was like meandering along, doing nothing, only started like stable, steady growth around the 90s and has gone up over 2 million in total now. Nevada, an even worse idea than Arizona. Vegas needs to be abandoned and destroyed. Was doing nothing like it should have done until Vegas really became a thing and it started turning into this, then went all the way up here. It stopped for a little bit. That was the hopeful time, but then it started going up again. And now it's getting close to 3.5 million. New Hampshire was growing up until around the late 2010s, or sorry, late 2000s, early 2010s. It stopped for a while and has resumed, but not that quickly. And they're up at about 1.4. New Jersey, again, you can see the manufacturing decline, a stall there in the population numbers. 70s through 80s stalled, resumed growing a bit, and started curving out into a plateau until you hit the later 2010s and into the 2020s, where you get an influx of people and then a steady growth upwards after being stagnant for like 10 or 15 years. And it's getting close to 10 million. New Mexico, not a great idea either, but not as frowned upon by Max Ogier, at least, because it doesn't have as many people as Arizona. Uh, was going up, stopped, was going up, 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 pretty bad, but then good, went flat. Stay right there, New Mexico. Stay at about 2.1 million. That's fine. You don't need any more. New York State, not the city, the whole state, went from 15 up to the 70s and went into this decline, rebound, and has basically kind of just undulated right below 20 up until just these last couple of years where it has gone over 20 million. North Carolina has gradually increased its rate of increase over time and has gone over the last 76 years from 4 million up close to 12 million. North Dakota just undulated around up until the shale boom in the late 2000s brought a bunch of workers and their families in. That what? No, I didn't tell you to do that. Surged up close to 800,000 and has since kind of just stayed there. Ohio went from 8 million up to 11 million, but then again, you see the manufacturing decline give you the population stagnation there till it started going up again, but then really slowed down ever since then and has so gradually climbed its way up to now 12 million. Oklahoma was curving up, stalled in the late 70s, early 80s, then went up again and has gradually gone up over 4 million. Oregon also stalled in the late 70s, early 80s, but then resumed growing. But once you hit the 2010s, it plateaus off a bit above 4 million. Pennsylvania grew a bit, but hit the 70s and it just stagnates all the way through. And long term does grow from 12 to 13, but really, really gradually. Puerto Rico, the island grew up to a peak population of about 3.8 million in 2000 and has since declined down, had a rebound, but then continued declining and is down closer to 3.1 or 3.2. Rhode Island uh, has had different rates of growth and random uh, pence and TP looking formations, but has meandered its way from 800,000 up to 1.1 million. South Carolina, the states that I'm in my exile in, has grown from 2 million up close to, unfortunately, 6 million over the last 76 years. South Dakota was pretty stagnant up until the 90s, from which it started growing and has gone from 700 up to 900,000. Tennessee has kind of consistently continued growing over time from over 3 million up to over 7 million. Texas, again, not that great of an idea. Not an arid desert, but it is a boiling hot, on fire underworld where your AC is going to be running like 24/7. And they went from 9 million in 1950 all the way up to 32 million as of today. Utah, Mormon land. It's famous for that, but it's not actually like 90% population is Mormons or something. There are a lot of Mormons, but it's not like everybody is a Mormon. Went from 800,000 up to now 3.5 million. Vermont was flat for a couple decades, grew for a few, and then has stayed flat roughly until the COVID bump, where a bunch of people moved to Vermont or back to Vermont, I guess maybe, which put it up here, but it has still stayed flat there since then, around 650. Virginia has grown pretty consistently over time, although you can see here it has now slowed down. It's gone from 3.5 up to 9 million. Washington State in the Pacific Northwest has gone from 2.5 or a bit over 2 up to 8. West Virginia was higher pre 1950 than it is today, or than it was at any time between now and 1950. It was once over 2 million back in the 40s or back before 1950, but it declined since then, rebounded in the 70s and 80s, declined again, and has just stayed stale at about 1.7. Supposed to load the rest of them. There we go. Thank you. Well, there's only two more. Wisconsin was growing, hit the manufacturing stall, then was growing again, very gradually, has just reached 6 million. And Wyoming, weird, wacky patterns, was doing this snake thing, had this massive upsurge, collapsed from that upsurge, and then was doing whatever, had another upsurge, and has plateaued since then, a bit under 600,000. So there you go. Those are those, whatever. Uh, Chile's, uh, well, let's go into those since someone expressed, actually spoke again and expressed interest in something. That's a place to go. They went as low as 0.88, which is, kind of a bit of an eyebrow raiser, Chile, because, 88's the Nazi number, and you guys just elected a neo-Nazi. So I'm watching you, like Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. I'll be watching you. But they rebounded from that back up to 1.07 children per woman, and it's not just Chile. Uh, almost all of Latin America is now undergoing further collapse. They were already a lot lower than people thought they were. Like it was a typical like racist thing in the U.S. to uh, say like blah 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 the Mexicans, which coming from a American racist usually just means anyone south of the American border. So it'd usually be like, oh, the Mexicans have a billion kids, and they're gonna have like the population of China sometime soon, and then they're gonna like take over. But Latin American fertility rates were actually already a lot lower than people culturally assumed they were, and a lot of them have been dropping. Chile is not an outlier. Uh, like Colombia is down to 1.06, Costa Rica is down to 1.09. Mexico itself, I have not updated to the latest numbers yet, but where are they? They were at 1.38 at the start of last year. They are now uh, down to, I believe, 1.31 or 1.32. So the Latin American countries are all like nosediving. They are we're waiting to see whether they end up having a European-esque fertility rate floor, as European countries seem to have their floor at about 1.1. Uh, or Italy has just reached 1.1. We'll see if they go lower than that. Who was the best floor example? Spain, because they've been there for a little bit, I think. Yeah, European countries seem to have a floor of about 1.1 that they won't go under, at least for prolonged periods. It's East Asian countries that seem to have a floor that's much lower, like they'll go all the way down to 0.7. We're waiting to see if the Latin American countries end up having a Europe style floor of around 1.1 or a East Asian style floor of, like 0.7. The Middle East seems to have a European style floor, as some countries, the richest ones, the Persian Gulf nations, have gone down to about that level, and they've not gone further. Like again, this is out of date. Looks like this only went up to 2024, I think, for UAE, but they've curved off here. So it looks like the Middle East, as in the Arabian region and Africa, it looks like they're going to have the European style floor, or sorry, North Africa. For Sub-Saharan Africa, I don't know because not many of them are actually down there yet. But even they're lower than people think they are. Like the actual numbers for Somalia they're already down to 5. Actually, as of the start of this year, they're probably just slightly below it. Uh, Before, and actually on some sites, like if you look at probably a lot of the UN published stuff, like the UN pages will still just show Somalia at like 8 children per woman as a flat line indefinitely, but that's not how reality works. And now that Somalia stabilized over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been able to get retroactive data via, getting to look at documents that were kind of just like sitting around collecting dust in filing cabinets. Uh, the government was able to like go around and speak to people and ask like, okay, how many of you had children, during which time frame, how many did you have, how many survived, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've gotten, for Somalia's example specifically, this is the realistic picture of what happened for their fertility rate. This was the height of the civil war and the famine in the 90s, rebounded, but then started going down like a lot of other places. I mean, not as steeply as some other places, but and they started from a higher locality, but they still started going down. Others like Nigeria, this is outdated. Yeah, that's outdated by 2 years, actually. Nigeria is down to 4.1. Uh, some countries like Namibia and Kenya are actually already down under 3 for sub-Saharan Africa. But we're, like I said, waiting to see what kind of floor Latin America has, because we know what kind of floor Europe has and what kind of floor, uh, what kind of basement level East Asia has. And it seems like we've got the idea for what the floor or basement level for the Middle East is. And there are some cases where it's artificial, like Ukraine's fertility rate did this, but obviously, you can kind of figure out why there was a thing that happened here. So that is an outlier you have to exclude from like the regular European data. Even in North Africa, outside of the rich Persian Gulf nations of the Eastern Middle East, you still have countries like Tunisia is already down at like 1.5. Islands, a lot of the island nations already went down, like well before anything, even when they were poor. Trinidad and Tobago is not poor anymore, but even back when they were quote unquote poor, they already went down really fast. That seems to be a common happening with island nations specifically. Even as poor as Sri Lanka is off the coast of India, Sri Lanka is already down to like 1.4. Let's see. Actually, okay, okay, you escaped that time. Let's see. Blah blah blah. Yep, I've heard that one. I've heard that one before. Oh crap! I've had that open this whole time. That would have been lagging this whole thing. Let's see. I'm probably gonna call it off with the fertility rate ones, uh, unless other stuff unless other stuff or super chats or anything comes up. But I'll still run through like a number of these at least. Like got Algeria already had dropped down pretty low. They rebounded here for fertility rate, but since then they've been coming down. And again, I have not updated these yet. Like the last time I updated theirs was way back in 2024. They are down around like 2.4 right now. Angola is in this graph. They're still up at 5, but they're actually at 4.8. Wait, why am I clicking out and coming back in? Argentina has plunged all the way down to 1.14. You know, once you get into the 2010s, that's when you see a lot of these drops start. For countries that whose people could already afford, you know, stuff at the time, who could already, have access to it when everything began. The 2010s is when social media came into existence. And so there's a correlation that's kind of emerging as pretty obvious. Since if you go onto any website, Twitter for the easiest example, and you look at and attempt to interact with people you think are other human beings. At least 90% of them are bots. Even even you know Mr. Self-proclaimed 500 IQ Elon Musk himself has admitted that about his site now. 90% of them are bots. But even, take and look at the interactions people have with each other and, people who are coming into the age where they would otherwise have children or first, get together with someone and get married and then have children are looking at the stream of uh, this display of their fellow human beings and are seeing their fellow human beings openly, out themselves as insanely like cultish, either cultish or racist or both, or or ethnicist in the case of like Eastern European stuff or Middle Eastern stuff, uh, or just generally outing themselves as like sociopaths who enjoy watching people die. And so, getting this insight into the secret heart of man, of their fellow human beings, that social media has allowed so many uh, really just demons inhabiting human bodies to express themselves, it has really not encouraged people to want to get together with anybody because, you know, now you're kind of thinking, is this person sitting across the table from me? Like, if, if I suggested something like, murdering children is bad, would they actually agree with me? Or would they, start listing off, bullet point, conditional exceptions about, actually it's okay if you do it for this reason, or it's okay if, they're children from this country, it's okay to kill them then, you know, things of that sort, not specifically just the children stuff, just things of that level of like what would have previously been perceived as like demonic insanity. Humanity is revealing its inner self and it does not want to actually interact with itself. Maybe that was always the case for the majority of human beings, uh, which is a potentiality that I tackle in uh, the the literary or the writing project I'm working on, writing the script slash screenplays for would be episodes of a non-existent 2D indie animated series about a version of something similar to World War One, but in my fictional universe where it happens for different reasons and is not as meaningless as the real First World War was, but where the characters that my friend Anya from Belarus has drawn for me one by one live. You got Andim, you got Elem, Mepria, and oh yeah, they're back over here. Ash and Ban. She can do one per month for me as the primary concept artist of the project because she has to spend the rest of the month drawing stuff for people who can actually afford to like pay her. And unfortunately, the people who can actually afford to pay her tend to be people who are like freaks who want like fetish stuff. But if I ever had like the actual money, I would like pay her a salary or something so she could not have to deal with them anymore. But yeah, Armenia is a rare exceptional case. They got down to like 1.5 and actually kind of have gone back up to 1.8 since then. Austria managed to stay closer to 2 until you see social media hit. Then they start going down. Azerbaijan covered it too for a bit, but late 2010s, they start going down. The Bahamas have been just consistently going down right up until the last 5 to 7 years. They've stayed at about 1.5. Bahrain, one of the rich ones, is down under 2 and heading down still. Bangladesh is under 2. Belarus is close to 1, but it looks like they're going to hit that European floor of 1.1. Belgium is on its way down. Again, they were actually going back up, but then you see the social media hit, and then it's been this trajectory ever since. Bolivia is, this is outdated. They're down to 1.8 now. But Bosnia got down close to 1.1, has gone back up a bit. Botswana, one of the lowest African nations, is actually almost down to 2. I think this, or last year, technically, I keep forgetting it's 2026 now. They came in at 2.1 exactly. Brazil is, this is again outdated because I didn't, these are from 2024. This was when they were at 1.6, I think. They're now down to 1.4. Bulgaria has been a bit weird. They're around like 1.5. Burkina Faso peaked at 7 children per woman and has gone down to 4 since then. I think they're actually at 3.85 now. Cambodia, civil war and genocide, bounced back up, and since then they've come down to about 2. Cameroon, down to 4 exactly this year. Canada held out around 1.5, started to tip over once you get the social media, but it looks like they're going to hit the European style floor though. Central African Republic wobbled around 6, but just recently started going down because the civil war got worse. Chad declined very slowly, but then started tipping down, which is a bit surprising for them. I wouldn't really, because I don't think that many of them had access to social media right away that early. So they might be an aberrant case. Chile dropped, stopped, dropped, stopped, stayed steady, and started plunging. Shunghua, China, went up here, dropped up and dropped, plummet. Then here, then stable up until the late 2010s, and they drop and now have started curving out, uh, but are still going down by a little bit. They're now, as of this year, down to 0.93. Colombia, already said, they're down to 1.06. Costa Rica down to 1.09. Cote d'Ivoire is down around 3.5. Croatia has stayed stable around 1.5. You guys are an anomaly. Cuba was around 1.5 for a few decades until the country started imploding and they've dropped off a cliff and they're down around 0.8 or 0.9. Czech Republic dropped, but rebounded and actually even kept going, even fought against the social media until the last 5 years or so, where they plummeted down to 1.3. The big Congo has just started going down by a bit, from 7 down close to 5. Denmark declined steeply, rebounded, held out here, and has started going down, but not as steep as some of the others. Dominican Republic, another Latin American country, was already down pretty low and slowed down in its decline, but has still kept going and is now under 2. Ecuador is down to 1.6 or so. Egypt, Moscow, is all the way down to almost 2 now. Estonia is heading down for potentially the European floor of 1.1, but we'll see. Ethiopia is already down to about 3.7. Fiji is down to 2. Finland seems to be stopping around 1.3. France has, after rebounding a bit, holding it two for a while, we get to social media and they start their journey downwards and are now down to 1.5 or so. Gabon has made its way down to about 3. Sakartvelo, the real name of Georgia, rebounded, but then tipped over and has been going down again. Deutschland, Germany dropped and stayed pretty stable around 1.4 for the longest time, had an uptick, started going down a little bit, and now started going down steeply. Ghana has gone from 7 all the way down to around 3.5. Greece, Hellas had a collapse in the 80s down to under 1.5 and has wobbled around since then until the 2020s, where they're now plummeting to their death. Guatemala has gone all the way down here. This is way outdated. You can tell that's only up to like 2023. As of the data from the start of this year, they're at 1.6. Guinea is down to, they're actually down to 4 now. Guyana is under 2. Haiti is down to 2.2. Honduras, again, outdated. They're at 1.8. Hungary, Magyarország declined, did recover, but has now tipped over. Iceland stayed pretty stable around 2 until looks like social media, but then they stopped in the late 2010s, but now they're going down further again. India has been a pretty stable line downwards, and they're down to between 1.8 and 1.9. Indonesia had declined down to 2.5, but stopped up until the 2010s, from which they've been going down. And now in the 2020s, they're going down more steeply. They're down to between 1.75 and 1.8. Iran, collapse, stall, rebound a bit, collapse, stall, collapse. They're suspected to be around 1.4. Iraq going down steadily, and they're down around 2.5 as of the start of this year. Ireland held out at 2 for a bit, but you get to social media, and here we go. Israel was at 4, dropped to 3, and has stayed there steadily up until the last 7 or 8 years, where they've tipped over, and they have dropped from 3.1 down to about 2.7 or 2.8. Italy dropped down close to the European floor, climbed back up from it. Social media hits, and they start going back down again, and have now reached the European floor. We'll see if they go below it or not. Jamaica is down close to 1. Japan, Nihon, has gone from over 2 down to 1.3, recovered a bit, but when you hit the end of the 2010s, they start going down and are at 1.12. Jordan in the Middle East, all the way from 8, now down to just above replacement level. Kazakhstan, from 4.5 down to 2, back up over 3, but now they've been going down. As of the start of this year, they're at like 2.7. Kenya is all the way down under 3 at like 2.7. Kuwait, another rich Persian Gulf nation, is around like 1.5. Kyrgyzstan have the same, go back upwards, but now has been on their way down. Laos has gone all the way down to 2. Latvia is heading down to the European floor. Lebanon is under 2. They're around 1.7 or 1.8. Libya is right at 2 or right above it. Lithuania has hit the European floor. Madagascar has gone under 4. Malaysia is most recently, I believe, they were around 1.5. Mali is down to just over 5 most recently. Mauritania is around 3.5. Mexico is, as of this year, down to 1.4. The graph is outdated, like I said. I'll work on it. Moldova, a bit of an anomaly, just doing their own thing, doing whatever. Mongolia dropped all the way to 2, recovered a bit, but has tipped over since then, and they're down to 2.4. Morocco is down. At the start of last year, they were down to 1.97. This year, as of the start of this year, they're only a bit further down, I think, at 1.94. Mozambique is getting close down to 4. Myanmar, when the civil war reignited, obviously they plunged under 2 and are still down there. Namibia is under 3. Nederland is going down more slowly than some other European countries, but social media is still taking its toll. Nepal is now under 2. New Zealand, you can see it hit there too. Make their way downwards. They're down to around 1.6. Nicaragua is under 2. Niger is has gone from 8 down to under 6. Nigeria, like I said, is down to just above 4. North Korea, by their reporting, is still at 1.8, but there are suspicions about those numbers. Norway is on its way down. It's gone down to 1.5. Oman, another rich Persian Gulf one, has not been updated. This looks like only 2023. They are under 2. They're at like 1.8 or 1.9. Pakistan is now down to rate about 3. Panama is down around 1.5. Papua New Guinea is down around 2.5. Paraguay is at like 1.8. Peru is their numbers for the start of this year. So again, not the ones on this graph, because I have a lot of laziness I have to make up for. Their numbers for this year are like 1.6. Philippines is all the way down to 1.4 as of the start of this year. Polska is just above 1. They're at like 1.09 or 1.08. Portugal has seemingly been a bit aberrant and held steady around 1.5. Qatar, another rich Persian Gulf nation, is down around 1.4 or 1.3. Romania managed to climb back up a little bit, but has hit the downturn. Russia, you go follow them, and they go down here, and then post Ukraine, they just start stating that their fertility rate has stayed at exactly 1.43 ever since then, and that's not the case. And you have the independent demographer dude who got out and moved to Istanbul, who was publishing actual numbers up until a year and a half ago, where he out of nowhere must suddenly copy pasted the same post to all of his accounts, where he was like, I apologize to all of those who follow me, but I have been lying for the last 3 years. All numbers published by the Russian government are truthful and correct. They should always be believed. I will no longer post. And I don't know, haven't seen him since then. So FSB got to him apparently. I really hope it was only a threat and he's not like dead in a ditch on the side of a road in Turkey somewhere. But they're down close to the European floor. And even before the Ukraine stuff, uh, Russia itself kind of casually would admit that the quote unquote ethnic Russians or white people Russians fertility rate was actually around there, and that it was kind of the 30 million or so other groups that were sort of keeping the face value numbers up. Rwanda is down close to 3. Saudi Arabia is down. Oh man, this one's way outdated. They're at like 1.8. Senegal is under 4. Serbia stayed pretty steady around 1.5. Even had this upbend, but has reversed it since then. Singapore continued this casual drop even further and are down now to 0.8. Slovakia recovered for a while, but then has gone down again. Slovenia seems to have resisted. They stayed around 1.5, dropped here, but are now stabilizing out again at 1.5. Somalia, we already discussed. South Africa is right around 2. Uh, South Korea, Hanguk, got as low as 0.67. They've since recovered to zero point 0.8. South Sudan is under 4. Spain, España seems to be holding at the European floor of 1.1. Sri Lanka is even down to like 1.5. Sudan, this is the furthest I was able to get when the Civil War started. The fertility rate started crashing, obviously, because people aren't having children when their every waking minute is spent running for their lives. So I did. This is a complete abyss of no data. I can't get anything else on this. The only other thing you could get is the generic UN algorithm that every, occasional decade they feel like updating it. Suriname is back over in South America is even below 2. Uh, Sverige or Sverige is down at, yeah, social media hit them. You can see it. And even took a steeper turn down here that looks like it's smoothing out, but they're around 1.4. Switzerland managed to stay kind of stable, but it looks like they're turning down. They're down around 1.3. Syria is down pretty close to 2. I think most recently they were at like 2.4. Taiwan is, if you extended it by one more year, you would see they curved further down. They're now all the way down to 0.8. Tajikistan is down to about 3. Tanzania, as of this year, is actually at a flat 4. Thailand is also down at 0.8. Togo is down under 4. Trinidad and Tobago, we already mentioned. Tunisia, we mentioned. Turkey, I think we already mentioned they're down towards like 1.4. Turkmenistan is down around 2. The UAE is down around 1.1. Uganda is still a bit above 4. The UK, there's the social media. Here we go. And they're down to about 1.4. Ukraine was down around like 1.3. Invasion, they crashed down to 0.6. Rebounded up to 0.9, and as of over the course of last year, 2025, they came in close to 1 at like 0.97. Uruguay was pretty stable right up until mid 2010s. Then it does this. Now they're down to 1.2. USA was at about 2 up until financial crisis. It curves out a bit, stalls a bit here until social media hits. Then we go down here. And now we're kind of a bit more stable post COVID, rated about 1.6. But that probably won't last forever. Uzbekistan recovered, went all the way back up to 3.5, but has since curved over. And if the graph were extended out to this year, they're down to, I think, 3.1 or 3.2. Venezuela is a bit further down than this. They're like 1.7. Vietnam has been going down, and they're a bit further than this now, unfortunately. They're down to like 1.8. Yemen has gone all the way down to a bit under 3. Zimbabwe is around 3.5. And it's not going any further, so it looks like that's the limit. Yep, that's as far as I got. Okay, that's probably where I'm going to have to end this because my throat is starting to burn and I want to get to spend some time writing. But that's always awesome to have a long 3-hour video that I don't have to worry about editing. I can just be lazy. Let's see. Uh, man, there was a lot of stuff. Let's see. Uh, for fixable, it depends on what you mean by fixable. If you're referring to the rate going back up, that would require returning to a less demonic state of humanity, which apparently never actually existed. It's just that the anonymity of social media posting just kind of let us look into ourselves. Uh, and there are some things you can do that have worked a bit of magic in some places, but just not a lot. For the like labor shortage issue, everyone kind of just turns to immigration for that. Like even the super conservative Japanese prime minister that just won, she ran like part of her campaign was like cutting limiting the number of allowed immigrants. But as soon as she won, she put forth her like stuff that she's going to do, and part of it was to double the amount of allowed immigrants. So even apparently even anti-immigration people are now just pulling the bait and switch on their own voters in countries where there's going to be labor shortage issues. But yeah, the I mean, robotic arms can replace some stuff, but as the whole AI spiral has proven, there's quite a lot of aspects where you really can't actually viably replace a person. Let's see. Yeah, something of the sort. Like, uh, I'm gonna do a whole separate thing about that, about how the current economic model we ride on is inherently doomed from the start. But that's a subject for another time. Let's see. Uh, yeah, it's partially by accident, but some aspects of of social media engineering are have been revealed to be on purpose. So not like deep Illuminati triangle uh like purpose, as in like it was intended to try to drop birth rates or anything. The purpose was the purpose of intentionally setting up algorithms to put us in this endless circle jerk that we've been in, because it's the most enticing thing to us apparently that gets us to click the most, and thus the social media system can keep making more money. So again, it was a lot of the algorithm design is not accidental, it is intentional. It's just not it's not deliberately sinister. The outcomes it is having on society is absolutely sinister. But this has happened before with a lot of things in the past, where uh, dudes want to profit from something, and they arrange things so that they can profit from something, and it has catastrophic results for the general society at large that they live in. It's just that social media has now done this on a like previously unfathomably global scale. Let's be Russian. The yeah the Caucasus region is one of the few areas, if you look at like a distribution map, where it's most of the places in the Caucasus are roughly, I think, each individual like state or oblast or whatever in the Caucasus is around like 1.8 or so. I know Dagestan is 1.9, and I think most of the others except for Chechnya are 1.8, and then Chechnya is like 2.5 or 3 or something because it's an Islamic death cult or whatever, or a isolated Islamic feudal state on a leash. But then if you look at like say the Moscow area, not the city limits, but the general metro area of Moscow, which the entire metro area contains something like I don't know 18 million, and then the St. Petersburg area, which contains uh, I think like about half that, but together they're like around 30 million. Then the two of them together, both of them have like fertility rates around what the total national average is for South Korea, like 0.7. So the things like skew out, and I think Tatarstan has like 2.5 or 2.4. Bashkiri has like 2.1 or 2.3. Let's see. I don't know if it's Yakutia or Yatia. One of the ones in the east also has like a really high one that's like close to 3. But the Caucasus ones are not high, but they're nowhere. They're much higher than the like actual overall Russian average. Although even among the Caucasus, Chechnya then stands out like a giant Vlad the Impaler spike. I don't. No, I'm not concerned about the number of people. Uh, the primary issue with the demographic thing is just uh, yeah, the primary issue with like the demographic thing is you know let's pick one of the best slash worst examples, the South Korea version. The problem is, this is the whole idea of eventually having like 50, 60, 70% of your population be like old 80-year-old wrinkly crippled people that have to be supported by this like tiny batch of like working people, uh, and like societal decay issues like the UK is having, where they're increasingly making their younger populace angry because no matter which party is in power in the UK, they just keep voting to increase the size of the monthly pensions that old people receive. No, like literally, no matter which party, even fundamentally opposite parties, just keep voting for the same thing, and so it's like been making the working age population and youth population of the UK increasingly uh, displeased to boiling water levels nearly, and with like the whole lopsidedness like this, you end up with the whole youth to elderly money siphoning potential issue, which then will result in social upheaval. I mean, yeah, over time, it will probably self-regulate to some extent, but it is also part of that will still require some strangle leashes being applied to at least some specific aspects of social media. But we have seen things like this before, like that there have actually been fertility rate collapses of large scale in the past. And I'm not talking about the immediate 100 years past. I'm talking about over the course of history. We have actually seen things like this kind of happen, but they were very regional. And as a result of specific things, like in Europe in the 1600s during the 30 Years' War, which actually lasted, I think, like 33 years. But during the 30 Years' War, for a mixture of reasons, obviously because a lot of the men were away being sacrificed in a death contest of millions to see which monarchy would get to control the obligatory 51 plus percent of Europe's territory and thus be the de facto true controller of the continent. Since the men were away being sacrificed, they weren't there with most of the women to have a lot of children, and also couples that were still together during that time period really didn't want to have children because they were watching their male sons once they were like 15 get dragged off to be sent to sacrifice for the sake of one of two monarchies, and they were watching their female children grow up to be raped at age 12 when their town got like pillaged and sacked by the invading army. So a lot of places then it's not like we have like hardcore statistics for it, but uh, even back then, there is like you have the historians' recordings and the anecdotal recordings, and there is just like there is always population size evidence historically of like the population size in general like settlements or areas and whether it was growing or shrinking, which would kind of indicate either a high or low birth rate. And like during that time frame, yeah, in a lot of European countries, it did collapse pretty heavily. Some of the ones that had it the worst were the interior countries, like what would eventually become the Czech Republic, for example. And but that eventually, bounced back afterwards. But the interior countries actually did not even get a break from it because then, in the aftermath of the 30 Years' War, in the second half of the 1600s, uh, you then had the big Ottoman Empire thrust trying to push deep into Europe, which ended in. Let me see if I can get directly to Google Images without uh, But that, darn it. Damn it, I triggered their AI. Okay, well, we're here anyways, which, triggered the Battle of 1683 eventually, with the Winged Hussars, the infamous Winged Hussars charge, which the ride of the Rohirrim in the Pelennor Fields in Lord of the Rings was inspired by, except the Winged Hussars was 18,000 riders. Not all of them were winged hussars. Only like 3,000 of them had like the super epic Polish Giga Chad angel armor. The rest of them were just wearing regular, generic, generic. Damn it. What's the term? Not cringe normie gamer armor, but it was still 18,000 dudes in an epic ride that swept the Ottomans out from in front of Vienna. But so after the 30 Years' War was over, during the second half of the 1600s, the interior European countries just kept getting battered and went through the same damn thing. So their fertility rates were crashed in that time for double the length of time, and similar things actually kept happening to them over and over again. Which is take like Hungary, Magyarország, for example. That's why Hungary only in present day and at its highest points decades ago has gotten up to population levels of like 10 million a few times, despite the fact that uh, it more or less should actually have gone to heights of like 20 or 25, but it's never gone there because it's just kept getting killed over and over and over again, or not even directly, just happening to be in the middle of things as a middle battleground between alternate powers. So there have been big crashes before, but they've predominantly been regional, uh, and they've usually been kind of brute forced on by external factors. But they did always recover afterwards, but it usually took, decades afterwards for the recovery to happen. And in the present day, we've been trained to think in terms of financial quarters. Let's see. Uh, yeah, this will be the last thing I'll comment on. You see, the thing is, though, the issue I have with that, with user end things, is you're relying on the person to make the intelligent decision to implement it, which the dice ain't going to roll favorably in that direction. I mean, I implement moderations on my own ends, but in the only form I can, which is just repeatedly blocking a lot of accounts on a lot of sites. Apart from blocking, or in this case, since this is like my channel, banning people. You have the usual stuff, like racism, Heiling Hitler, or whatever. But then I've had to develop a immediate instinct for doing things like uh, banning people with a Roman or Greek statue as their profile pic, because that is an immediate giveaway of a specific personality type. Oh, convenient UI. If you mean like, okay, if you mean like, say there was just a button you could push, like there was just a big button that says filter or whatever, then like yeah, that okay, I would the dice would probably roll more favorably in favor of like more people would probably do that if it was that easy. But anything other than that, like especially with the way it is now, like I've seen people that I know personally and that I know are not, there's no way they're stupid enough to not be aware that basically anyone with a blue check mark on Twitter, for example, is a bot account. But I've watched them start getting into back and forth comment arguments with something they know is literally a bot, and I can't. Something is like breaking in your brain where your IQ is getting like severed to 10% at best for some reason when you look at that site. But anyways, yeah, my throat is killing me, and I want to actually finish writing episode 4 since I've said I was going to do that every day for like the last month. So this is where I'm dropping off. Thank you everybody who was here. And sorry I couldn't go through all of the actual graphs that are available in that folder because that's way, way too many. Way too many. And I don't just say numbers, I have that bad habit of actually talking about why X number is the way it is or why this drop happened here or there. So that's it for me, and I'll see you guys around.